Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world spun around Barry Allen, and he could feel the sharp twinge in his legs as they pumped faster than they'd ever gone before. His breath came in short, controlled bursts, each one a calculated motion as he fought to maintain his balance, his speed, and his focus. Central City blurred into a sea of flashing lights and indistinct shape. People, buildings, and cars became mere streaks in his vision as he pushed beyond the limits of what any human should be capable of. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Barry knew he had only a few seconds left before disaster struck. The power grid was destabilizing, and if he didn't reach the central generator in time, the entire city could be plunged into chaos, a rolling blackout that would shut down hospitals, schools, and emergency services. His body screamed in protest as he accelerated, forcing himself to tap deeper into the speed force. Suddenly, a bright flash of light erupted ahead, brighter than anything he'd ever seen, blinding him momentarily. Before Barry could react, the world around him twisted and warped, the streaks of light becoming jagged and chaotic. He felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever encountered, and then nothing. When his vision cleared, the world had stopped spinning, but something was very wrong. The streets of Central City had been replaced by cobblestone alleys dimly lit by the flickering orange glow of gas lamps. Barry stumbled to a halt, disoriented, and took in his surroundings. The buildings were old, their architecture a blend of Gothic and Victorian. Carriages drawn by horses rattled down the streets, and people in formal, outdated attire hurried along the sidewalks, unaware of his sudden appearance. This wasn't Dread Central City. This wasn't his time. Barry's heart raced, not from the exertion of speed, but from the realization that he had somehow traveled backward in time. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog of confusion, and instinctively looked at his wrist where his suit said GPS and temporal sensors were located. The readings were erratic, the numbers flickering wildly. What the hell? Before he could fully process what had happened, a familiar landmark caught his eye. Rising against the night sky, silhouetted against the distant clouds, was the unmistakable figure of Wayne Manor. Barry felt a chill creep down his spine as the pieces began to click together in his mind. This wasn't just any moment in time. He was in Gotham, and if his calculations were correct, he had landed in a night that would change the course of history. The night Bruce Wayne's parents were killed. The weight of the realization hit him hard, a knot forming in his chest. He knew this timeline. He knew the pain that had shaped Bruce into the man he became, into Batman. But now standing here, Barry had the chance to change it. He had the power to save them, to stop Thomas and Martha Wayne from being gunned down in front of their son. But should he? Barry Seal's mind raced with the possibilities. If he could prevent their deaths, Bruce would never become Batman. He'd never live through the trauma that haunted him. He wouldn't have to carry the burden of Gotham's darkness on his shoulder. Maybe, just maybe, Bruce could have a normal life, a better life. Barry started moving, his legs carrying him instinctively toward Crime Alley. He didn't need directions. The history of this night was etched into his memory, as much as it was into Bruce's. He could stop it. He could change everything. As he approached the alley, he slowed, his heart pounding in his chest. He heard footsteps echoing off the brick walls, the quiet murmur of conversation. Barry stopped just before the corner and peeked around the edge. There they were, the Waynes, walking hand in hand, laughing softly as they made their way down the alley. And there in the shadows lurked Joe Chill, the man who would take everything from them in a few short seconds. Barry clenched his fists, the speed coursing through his veins, begging him to act. He could rush in, disarm Chill, and whisk the Waynes away before the first gunshot echoed into the night. But then another presence appeared. Barry felt it before he saw it, a ripple in the air, the familiar gravitas that only one man carried. Batman stepped from the shadows, his cape trailing behind him like a dark specter. Barry froze as the Dark Knight's gaze locked onto him. Dante, Batman said, his voice low and steady, filled with warning. Barry blinked, the words catching him off guard. He stepped forward, unsure if he had heard him correctly. Bruce, I can save them. Batman's jaw tightened, his posture rigid, but his eyes beneath the cowl betrayed a flicker of pain. You can too, he replied. Shouldn't. The conflict between them hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Barry took a step closer, lowering his voice. Bruce, I know what this night did to you. I know how much it hurt, but I have the power to stop it. I can give you a life with without all of this. He gestured to the dark alley, to the shadows that seemed to cling to Batman like a second skin. A life where you don't have to be this. Batman's stance never wavered. I am who I am because of this night. If you change it, you change everything. Not just for me, for Gotham, for the world. Barry shook his head, his thoughts a whirlwind. But you could be happy. You could have your parents back. And what about the millions of lives Batman has saved? Batman countered, his voice rising slightly. What about the people who depend on me? The criminals who would tear Gotham apart without fear? If you take this away, what happens to them? Barry's frustration boiled over. I can fix it. I can find a way to make it right, to make sure everything works out. Batman's expression darkened, his voice turning cold. You're replaying with forces. You don't understand, Barry. You've done it before and you saw what happened. You want to try again. A shiver ran through Barry as memories of the Flashpoint event surged to the forefront of his mind. He had tried to rewrite history before to save his own mother from death, and the consequences had been disastrous. The timeline had unraveled, lives were changed, and the world had teetered on the brink of chaos. I am not trying to destroy anything, Barry argued. I just want to give you a chance. You don't have to carry this burden anymore. Bruce, you deserve a life too. For a long moment, Batman said nothing. The sounds of the city around them seemed distant, almost muffled. And then slowly, he spoke again, his voice softer, almost resigned. I gave up that life a long time ago, Barry. What I want doesn't matter anymore. Gotham matters, the world matters. The Waynes, they have to die. Barry's sire sank, his chest tightening with the weight of Bruce's words. He wanted to argue, to fight back, to save his friend from a lifetime of pain. But deep down, he knew Bruce was right. Changing this moment could unravel the very fabric of everything they had fought for. Before Barry could respond, a sudden distortion rippled through the alley. The walls shimmered and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. Barry and Batman both staggered as reality flickered, the result of the unstable timeline caused by Barry's presence. Time's destabilizing, Barry muttered, panic rising in his voice. We need to. The distortion intensified, and before they could react, a powerful surge of energy exploded from the alleyway. Barry was thrown back, his body slamming into the brick wall, while Batman remained grounded, fighting against the swirling maelstrom of time and space tearing at the fabric of reality. With a groan, Barry pushed himself up. His mind racing, he had to fix this fast. The distortion pulsed again, a jagged tear in the air between them, crackling with unstable energy. Batman grunted as he fought against the sheer force of the disturbance, but Barry could see the strain in his movements, the slow, inevitable pull of the temporal rift, threatening to suck them both in. Time itself was coming undone, reality fraying at the edges. Barry's mind raced. He had to stabilize the timeline before it collapsed completely, but the energy surging from the tear was wild, chaotic. If he didn't move quickly, they could both be swallowed by the paradox, lost forever in the ripples of a broken timeline. He pushed himself off the wall, forcing his legs to move. The world wobbled around him as he tapped into the speed force again, feeling it surge through his veins. But something felt off. The energy in the alley was distorting even his connection to it, making it harder to focus, harder to control. Bruce, he shouted, his voice barely carrying over the crackling roar of the distortion. Batman glanced at him, his jaw set in a grim line. Tara, I need to run. I can stabilize this, but I have to reset the timeline. You have to trust me. Batman hesitated, his eyes narrowing beneath the cowl. Trust. It was a word they rarely used with one another. There had always been an unspoken understanding, a bond forged through battle and hardship. But trust real. Trust was something else entirely. Do it, Batman growled, bracing himself as the energy swirled around him. Barry didn't waste another second. With a burst of speed, he shot forward, pushing through the distortion, feeling the resistance of the broken timeline, trying to pull him apart. Every step was agony, the fabric of reality warping around him. But he kept going, forcing himself through it. He had to reach the center. He had to close the loop. The speed force roared in his ears as he pushed harder, faster, his body becoming a blur of motion. The images around him flickered, visions of Gotham, of Bruce seeing past, of his own past. He saw Joe Chill in the shadows, the flash of the gun, the blood on the pavement. He saw Bruce as a boy, wide-eyed and terrified, standing over the bodies of his parents. He saw himself running through the streets of Central City, searching for answers, searching for a way to make things right. And then in an instant, it all clicked into place. The energy surged, the distortion crackled, and the tear, in reality, snapped shut. Barry came to a stop, panting heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. The alley was still, the world settling back into its proper place. The rift was gone, time had been restored. He looked up, and there was Batman, standing exactly where he had been before, watching him with those intense, unreadable eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension that had crackled between them earlier was still there, lingering in the air, like the fading echoes of the distortion. "Did it work, Batman?" His voice was low, gruff. Barry nodded, still catching his breath. Yeah, it worked. The timeline's stable again. Batman did respond right away. His gaze shifted to the spot where his parents had died all those years ago, the place where it had all begun. There was no blood on the pavement now, no echoes of that night in the air. But Barry knew the memory was still there. It etched into Bruce's mind as deeply as the pain that had shaped him. "You were right," and Barry said, quietly stepping closer. Couldn't change it. I shouldn't have tried." Batman's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned away from the alley, his cape swirling around him as he began to walk. Barry watched him for a moment, then followed, falling into step beside him. "You still think about them, don't you?" Barry asked after a long silence. Batman didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, his expression unreadable. But finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day." They walked in silence for a few more blocks, the sounds of the city gradually returning to normal around them. Barry could feel the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on him, the enormity of the choice he'd almost made. He had wanted to help, to save his friend from the pain that had defined his entire life. But in the end, he had realized that it wasn't his decision to make. "Bruce," and Barry said softly, breaking the silence, if you ever want to talk about it, I am here." Batman's eyes flicked toward him for a brief second, and for the first time in a long while, there was something in them that wasn't hard or distant. It was a fleeting moment, but it was there, a glimmer of something more. "Don't you push your luck, Barry?" Batman muttered, but there was no malice in his tone. Barry chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Yeah, figured as much." They reached the edge of Gotham's East End, where the shadows of the city were darkest, and Batman stopped, his gaze scanning the streets, as if searching for something. Barry knew that the look of a man constantly on guard, constantly ready for the next threat. "You sure everything's okay?" Barry asked, glancing around Dana after what just happened. "It's fine," replied. "The timeline. Stable. You did your job." There was a finality to his words, a signal that their conversation was over. Barry nodded, understanding. Batman wasn't here one for long goodbyes or drawn-out conversation. He lived in the shadows, fought in them, thrived in them, and Barry, as much as he wanted to help, knew that there were some things even he couldn't fix. "I'll see you around, Bruce," Barry said, stepping back, preparing to tap into the Speed Force again. Batman didn't respond, his attention already back on the city, his mind focused on the mission ahead. But as Barry took off, speeding away through the night, he caught one last glimpse of his friend standing tall against the darkness, the weight of the past still hanging over him, but no longer crushing him. Barry Allen ran through the streets of Central City, his mind still racing with the events of the night. He had come so close to changing everything, to rewriting a history that wasn't his to rewrite. But in the end, he had realized that some things, no matter how painful, were meant to be. Some choices weren't his to make. As he reached the outskirts of the city, he slowed to a stop, staring out at the horizon, the sun just beginning to rise. He thought of his own mother, of the night she had been taken from him, and of the countless times he had wished he could go back and change it. But now, after everything that had happened, he knew that even if he had the chance, he wouldn't. Some things had to remain as they were, and sometimes the hardest part of being a hero wasn't saving others, it was knowing when not to. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The night was silent, too silent for Gotham. It felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the tension. High above the streets on the edge of a rooftop stood the Dark Knight, scanning the city with a familiar intensity. His cape billowed in the cold breeze, its edges sharp against the skyline. Batman could feel it in his bones. Something was coming. He had faced countless enemies in his time, but this night felt different. It wasn't just the cold creeping into his body. It was the sense of foreboding that lingered in the air. A sudden explosion rocked the streets below. Batman's gaze snapped to the source, where flames licked up from a building in the distance. The faint screech of tires echoed up as the scene erupted into chaos. Another night in Gotham, Batman thought. But this time, he knew he'd have to push himself further than ever. He leaped from the rooftop without hesitation, descending to the magnet. As he landed in the thick of the action, Batman's eyes locked onto the hulking figure in the smoke. Bane, his towering frame was unmistakable, venom pumping through his veins, giving him monstrous strength. Bane's sound deep voice cut through the chaos. I told you, Batman, you cannot stop what's coming, he growled, throwing a car aside as if it weighed nothing. Gotham will break just like you. Batman clenched his jaw, tightening his grip on his grappling hook. The fight that followed was brutal. Bane was relentless, using his enhanced strength to pummel Batman again and again. Each hit felt like it was breaking something deep within him. But Batman didn't back down. He never did. Every punch he landed was precise, every movement calculated to bring the behemoth down. But it wasn't enough, not this time. A particularly devastating blow from Bane sent Batman crashing into the side of a building, the impact sending a shockwave through his body. The pain was blinding, but he forced himself to stand. He had to keep going for Gotham, for the city that needed him. But before he could steady himself, Bane was on him again. The ground trembled as the brute lifted Batman into the air, his voice filled with satisfaction. Do you see now, Dark Knight, you are only human. With one final bone-crushing slam, Bane sent Batman crashing into the pavement. The world around him blurred. The sound of sirens in the distance mixed with the fading echoes of the fight and then darkness. When Batman opened his eyes again, it wasn't through the familiar sight of Gotham skyline that greeted him. It was darkness, but a different kind. His body felt heavy, his mind clouded with pain. He tried to move, but his muscles refused to cooperate. Bruce, a voice called from somewhere nearby. It wasn't Alfred. It was lighter, quicker, filled with urgency. Bruce, it's Barry. Can you hear me? The Flash. Some voice cut through the haze, and slowly Batman's senses began to return. He was in the Batcave, laid out on a medical table, machines humming softly around him. But even as his body regained consciousness, the pain lingered, reminding him of how close he had come to the edge. Don't you try to move, Barry said, appearing in a blur of red beside him. You're still healing. Bane really did a number on you. Batman says instinct was to push past the pain, to get up and get back out there. Gotham didn't rest, so neither could he. But as he tried to sit up, a sharp wave of agony shot through his ribs, forcing him to slump back down with a groan. I told you, Barry said, his tone half concerned, half teasing. You're not invincible no matter how many gadgets you've got. Batman didn't respond. He didn't need to. He wasn't used to being the one lying down, the one being taken care of. It felt wrong. Flash hovered around, nervous energy radiating off him as he paced the Batcave. Alfred said I was going to get supplies, but he said it'll take time for you to fully recover. So I guess it's just you and me for a while. Barry tried to sound casual, but Batman could sense the worry beneath the word. Time stretched in the Batcave with Barry refusing to leave Batman's side. Flash wasn't one for sitting still, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon Bruce, not when he was like this. Days passed, and Batman remained in a deep, restless sleep. Each time Barry checked in on him, the sight of the bruises on Bruce's body, the bandages, the slow beeping of the heart monitor, it all chipped away at the image of the indestructible Batman that everyone, including Barry, held in their minds. Barry had fought alongside Bruce for years, had seen him take on gods and monsters, always coming out on top. But here he was, mortal fragile, and Barry didn't know how to handle it. While Bruce slept, Barry explored the Batcave. It was enormous, more than he had ever realized from the few times he had been there on mission. The cavern was filled with relics of Batman, sent past trophies from battles long won, and scars from battles lost. As Barry wandered through the shadows, he stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to find, an old journal tucked away behind a display case. He hesitated, glancing back toward Bruce's unconscious form, before curiosity got the better of him. The journal was filled with Bruce's meticulous handwriting, entries chronicling his thoughts, fears, and doubt. Barry skimmed through, surprised by what he found. Beneath the cold, calculating exterior, Bruce was constantly haunted by the weight of his choices. Every death, every failure, it was all here in these pages. Batman wasn't just a symbol of justice. He was a man burdened by guilt and responsibility. The more Barry read, the heavier his heart became. He always looked up to Bruce, admired his strength and determination. But now he saw the man behind the mask, the broken man, the one who bore the weight of an entire city on his shoulders, with no one to lean on. It was the third night after Bruce had been injured when he finally stirred. Barry, sitting in the chair beside him, jolted awake at the sound of movement. He was at Bruce's side in an instant, watching as the dark night slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the dim light of the cave. "Bruce," Barry said softly, relief flooding through him. "You ran away." Bruce groaned, his body stiff and unresponsive. Every inch of him felt like it had been put through a grinder, but he forced himself to focus. He had to get up. There was too much to do. "Some state try to move," Barry said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were not fully healed yet, Bane? He really did a number on you." Bruce's jaw tightened at the mention of Bane. He remembered the fight vividly, the way the hulking brute had overpowered him, the way he had been thrown around like a rag doll. The shame of it burned in his chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. Gotham needed him. "I have to get back out there," Bruce rasped, trying to sit up. Barry shook his head. "You can try not yet. You need time to heal." "I don't have time," Bruce growled, his voice strained with pain. He pushed against Barry's but his strength failed him. He fell back against the bed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Barry watched him for a moment, torn between admiration and frustration. "Bruce," he said quietly, "you and I always have to do this alone. You've got the lead. You've got me." Bruce's gaze flickered to Barry, the intensity in his eyes fading for just a moment. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by the familiar cold mask of Batman. "I've always been alone," Bruce said, his voice flat. "It's the only way I know how to do this." Barry looked at Bruce, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had read and the reality of seeing the mighty Batman so broken. He wanted to argue, to convince Bruce that he wasn't alone, but he knew better than to push too hard. Instead, he offered a softer approach. "You don't have to do everything tonight, Bruce. Let me handle Gotham for a while. You've got to heal. Bane hit you hard." Barry's voice was calm but firm. He needed Bruce to understand that he wasn't asking for permission. He was telling him how it was going to be. Bruce, the silence spoke volumes. The tension between them was palpable. But in that silence, Barry caught a glimpse of something deeper, something Bruce was unwilling to say. For a moment, Barry considered saying more, maybe something to lighten the mood, but he knew Bruce wouldn't appreciate it. Instead, he placed his hand gently on Bruce's shoulder, letting the gesture convey what words couldn't. "I'll be out there," Barry said quietly, "but I'll be back." With that, he sped out of the Batcave, a red blur vanishing into the night. The streets of Gotham were always buzzing with some form of chaos. Tonight it seemed quieter, but Barry knew better than to trust the calm. He moved through the city at superhuman speed, checking in on the usual trouble spot. The criminals of Gotham, always lurking in the shadows, knew that Batman was out of commission. Word spread quickly in the underworld, but they hadn't counted on the Flash stepping in. Barry handled them with ease, disarming thugs and stopping heists before they even started. But as the night wore on, his mind kept drifting back to Bruce. He couldn't shake the image of Batman lying broken on that table, nor the pages of the journal that revealed a man far more fragile than he'd ever imagined. Back at the Batcave, Bruce was restless. His body ached with every breath, but it wasn't just the physical pain that gnawed at him. It was the vulnerability. Barry had seen too much, learned too much. Bruce had spent years cultivating an aura of invincibility, and now with just a few days of unconsciousness, that facade had started to crumble. Barry's words echoed in his mind. "You don't have to do this alone." It wasn't that simple, though. It never had been. Bruce's whole life had been defined by solitude, by the need to carry the burden of Gotham on his own shoulders. He didn't know any other way, but as much as he wanted to deny it, there was a kernel of truth in Barry's words that gnawed at him. Maybe it wasn't weakness to let someone else share the load. Barry returned to Wayne Manor, his usual energy subdued by the long night of patrolling. Alfred met him at the entrance, looking more worn than usual, though he greeted Barry with his usual formal nod. "Master Barry," Alfred said. Thank you for keeping an eye on things. Master Bruce is awake, but I fear his stubbornness is stronger than his injury. Barry offered a tired smile. That sounds about right. Mind if I check in on him? Alfred waved him in. By all means. He could use the company, though. He'll never admit it. Barry made his way back to the Batcave. Bruce was sitting up now, his face pale but alert, his gaze scanning the monitors that lined the cave. He didn't tell look at Barry when he entered. You were out there last night, Bruce said, his voice rough from disuse. Barry shrugged. Gotham needed someone. I figured you could use the rest. Bruce's eyes flickered toward him, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. But the gratitude was buried beneath layers of stoicism, as it always was with Bruce. Barry didn't need to mind. He understood Bruce better now, and he need words to feel the connection they share. I am not going to be down for long, Bruce said after a long pause. Bane one tea, wait for me to recover. Bane says, not the only one I am worried about, Barry replied. You've imaginees who would love to see Gotham fall apart, especially with Batman out of the picture, but I've got it under control. Bruce said, nothing. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of unspoken thought. Barry could feel Bruce surge tension, the internal battle he was fighting between his need to be out there and his inability to accept help. I know what you were thinking, Barry said, breaking the silence. You think you can handle it all, that you have to, but even Batman needs someone watching his back. Bruce's jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening. Barry could see he was struggling to keep his composure. Finally, Bruce spoke, his voice low and rough. I can't afford to be weak, Barry. Not now, not ever. You are not weak, Barry said, meeting Bruce's intense gaze. You read human there, says a different. Bruce exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders loosening ever so slightly. But he didn't say anything. Barry took that as a small victory. The days passed in a blur of red and black. Barry continued to patrol Gotham, taking down criminals with his usual efficiency, while Bruce remained in the Batcave recovering. Barry visited regularly, their conversations growing more frequent, more personal. Bruce never fully opened up, but he didn't need to. Barry could see the cracks, the vulnerability just beneath the surface. One night, after a particularly quiet patrol, Barry returned to the Batcave expecting to find Bruce in his usual spot, staring at the monitor. But this time Bruce wasn't through there. Instead, he found Bruce standing in front of the display case where the journal had been. Did you read it? Bruce asked, his back to Barry. Barry hesitated. Yeah, I did. Bruce didn't turn around. His voice was steady, but Barry could hear the strain in it. Then you know why I do this, why I can't stop. I know you've been carrying a lot, Bruce, more than anyone should have to, but you read not alone. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Bruce finally turned to face him, his expression unreadable. It's not about being alone, he said quietly. It's not about responsibility. Every life in Gotham is my responsibility. I can let that go. Barry nodded, understanding now more than ever. But he also knew that Bruce couldn't carry that weight forever. You don't have to let it go, Barry said, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself, either. Bruce didn't respond, but Barry could see something shift in his eyes, just a flicker, a hint of acknowledgement. That night, Gotham fell into chaos again. A new threat emerged, one that couldn't be ignored. A villain, emboldened by the rumors of Batman's incapacitation, took the city hostage. Explosions rocked the streets. Fires burned out of control, and Gotham was on the brink of collapse. Barry didn't hesitate. He suited up and raced into the heart of the city, his mind focused on the task at hand. But even as he sped through the chaos, his thoughts kept returning to Bruce. He knew Bruce would want to be out here, fighting alongside him, but Barry also knew that Bruce wasn't ready. As the night wore on, the battle intensified. Barry found himself overwhelmed, the sheer scale of the destruction pushing him to his limit. He could feel his energy draining, the weight of Gotham's fate pressing down on him. But just when he thought he might collapse, a familiar figure appeared beside him. It was Bruce, weak, injured, but determined. Batman had returned. Together, they fought through the night side by side. Bruce's presence was a reminder of the strength they shared, the bond that had been forged in the darkness. And as they stood together, watching the city slowly return to order, Barry knew that something had changed. Bruce had let him in, if only a little. When the battle was over and the fires had been extinguished, Bruce turned to Barry, his expression softened by exhaustion. Thank you, Bruce said quietly, the words heavy with meaning. Barry smiled, feeling the weight of the night lift from his shoulders anytime. They stood together in silence, watching the first light of dawn break over Gotham. In that moment, Barry realized that while Gotham might always need Batman, Batman didn't he always have to stand alone. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The night had fallen over Gotham City, but instead of the familiar hum of streetlights and the glow of neon signs, the city was plunged into an eerie darkness. The usual pulse of the metropolis seemed to falter, leaving only silence in its wake. From atop the tallest skyscraper, Batman stood motionless, his cape billowing in the faint wind. The city stretched out before him, a sea of shadows. Something was wrong. Bruce Wayne had seen many things in his time as Gotham's protector, but this felt different. And wasn't she just a blackout? The entire grid had collapsed in an instant, like someone had pulled the plug on Gotham itself. His hand instinctively reached for his communicator, but it too was dead. His tech was as powerless as the city below. In that moment, Batman knew this was no accident. Descending into the depths of the Batcave, the ride was slower than usual, the emergency power systems barely functioning. When the platform finally came to a halt, the dark chamber that usually buzzed with energy and light was now nearly as black as the streets above. The large display screens were frozen, showing static, and the Bat computer itself flickered as if struggling against some invisible force. Alfred, ever composed, approached from the shadows, holding a dim lantern. "Master Wayne, it seems we've lost power throughout the estate." "It's not just here," Bruce replied, his voice low and focused. "Eerie, the entire city sign out." Bruce's mind raced as he tried to analyze the situation. Gotham had its share of villains with a penchant for chaos, but few had the capability to take down the entire power grid with such precision. He tapped a few buttons on the Bat computer, trying to reroute power from auxiliary systems, but even the backup was weak. Whoever had done this knew Gotham inside and out. They had targeted the city's lifeblood, and now the city was choking in the dark. "We need more information," Batman muttered, barely audible as he reached for the cowl once more. "I need to get out there." With a swift motion, Bruce suited up, the weight of his armor pressing on his shoulders, like the weight of the city itself. As he mounted the Batmobile, the engine sputtered to life, its systems barely functioning, but enough to get him to the city. Bruce guided the vehicle toward the center of Gotham, hoping to find answers. The streets of Gotham were far from quiet, even in darkness. The city never truly slept. But now, without the faintest glimmer of light, the air felt thick with unease. The police scanners were out, and with no power, emergency services were overwhelmed. Crime ran rampant, like predators sensing the vulnerability of their prey. Batman navigated the streets, evading small pockets of chaos and looters. Gotham had descended into a dangerous free-for-all. As he moved through the city, something caught his eye, an unusual surge of light from a distant rooftop. The energy signature was different from the usual flickers of emergency lighting. It was controlled, purposeful. Without hesitation, Batman altered his course and made his way toward it. As he approached the rooftop, a bolt of lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the figure standing there. A tall man, cloaked in dark metallic armor, stood at the edge, his hands crackling with raw electricity. This was no ordinary thug. Batman's instincts flared as he assessed the situation. He had heard rumors about a new player in town, someone calling themselves the Conductor. It seemed the rumors were true. Before Bruce could make a move, a blur of red speed past him, and Batman knew immediately who it was. "You relayed Flash, Batman," said, his voice steady, watching as the Flash came to a halt beside him, his suit glowing faintly in the darkness. "Gotham's traffic is worse than I remember," Flash quipped, trying to lighten the mood, but even his voice had an edge of concern. "What's the deal with the city-wide blackout? I couldn't get any signals on my way here." "That's our target," Batman said, motioning toward the Conductor. "He's taken control of Gotham's entire electrical grid. The entire city is at his mercy." Flash's eyes followed the direction Batman indicated. "Well, that's not good." With barely a nod, the two heroes launched into action. Batman flanked to the left, moving silently through the shadows, while Flash, true to his nature, sped toward the Conductor with lightning speed. But the Conductor was ready. As Flash closed in, a surge of electricity burst from the villain's hands, arching through the air like a storm given form. Flash skidded to a halt, narrowly dodging the energy blast. "I've been expecting you," the conductor said, his voice cold and metallic through the speaker embedded in his helmet. His gauntlets sparked and flared as he spoke. "I control all the power here. You're nothing in this city now." Flash darted from side to side, avoiding the arcs of electricity. But with each blast, the conductor seemed to grow stronger, drawing more power from the city's grid. Meanwhile, Batman worked in the shadows, scanning for a weak point. He knew Flash, speed alone, wouldn't he be enough to take this guy down. The conductor wasn't just using the grid, he was the grid. Every ounce of energy in Gotham was under his control, and that made him virtually untouchable. Bruce had faced worse odds before. He needed to find the source. The core of the conductor sent power. Something wasn't adding up. This level of control required more than just manipulation. It required an anchor, something tying the conductor to the grid. "Flash, keep him distracted," Batman said's voice crackled through the comms. "Need more time." "No problem," Flash replied, though the strain was evident in his voice. The conductor says attacks were relentless, forcing the speedster to push himself to the limit, just to stay ahead of the storm. But Flash trusted Batman. If anyone could find a solution, it was him. Batman's investigation led him to a series of control panels along the building's infrastructure. Hidden beneath layers of concrete and metal was a device, an amplifier designed to draw power directly from the city's core. It was sophisticated, far beyond anything Batman had seen before. Whoever the conductor was, he wasn't just a tech genius. He was something more, something far more dangerous. Batman wasted no time. Using his tools, he began dismantling the device, but it wasn't simple. Every wire, every circuit was booby-trapped, designed to send lethal charges of electricity through anyone who tampered with it. Batman's hands worked quickly, his mind focused, even as he heard the sound of Flash fighting for his life above. "Bruce, Flash's voice crackled through the comm again. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. This guy's drawing from everywhere, building streetlights, even the cars. It's like he's becoming pure energy." "Just a few more seconds," Batman replied, though he wasn't sure himself if it would be enough. His fingers danced over the circuits, and finally, with one last twist of his wrist, the device powered down. Instantly, the crackling energy in the air began to fade. The conductor's send control was weakening. "Now, Flash," Batman commanded. With renewed vigor, Flash rushed forward, his speed now unhindered by the conductor's sailing power. He delivered a flurry of strikes, each one faster than the last, until the conductor collapsed to his knees, his suit sparking and malfunctioning. The villain tried to rise, but Batman appeared from the shadows, delivering the final blow, a carefully aimed batarang that severed the last connection to his power source. As the conductor fell, his suit went dark, and Gotham's lights flickered back to life, one by one. Batman stepped back, watching as the conductor slumped to the rooftop, his body convulsing slightly as the residual electricity sparked around him. The faint glow of Gotham streetlights slowly pulsed back to life, casting long shadows across the city. For a brief moment, the two heroes stood still, breathing heavily, the weight of their victory settling in. "Not bad for a guy who likes to play in the dark," Flash quipped, catching his breath. His tone was light, but his face betrayed the exhaustion of the battle. Batman, ever composed, simply nodded. He was drawing too much power from the grid. "I cut him off at the source." Flash walked over to the conductor's motionless form, kneeling to check if the villain was still conscious. His helmet had cracked from the final impact, revealing a man underneath, older than expected, his face twisted in a mix of pain and disbelief. He looked up at Flash with hazy eyes, the once proud and powerful antagonist now reduced to a shadow. You don't understand," the conductor gasped, his voice weak, barely audible. "The city needs to be rebuilt. I was going to reset it, give it order." Batman loomed above him, his voice cold and authoritative. "Gotham doesn't need your version of order. It thrives in the chaos you fear." His words were sharp, a reminder of the balance Batman had fought to maintain for years. The conductor coughed, his body barely holding together. "You read just as blind as they are." Before Batman could respond, the conductor's eyes rolled back and his body went limp. Flash reached for his pulse, but there was none. Batman stared for a moment, his mind racing. There had been something off about the conductor's last word. It wasn't just the rambling of a defeated villain. There was a conviction behind it, something that hinted at a larger plan, but for now, that puzzle would have to wait. Flash stood up, brushing dust from his suit. Well, that's one for the book. Gotham's lights are back on, and the bad guys separate down, all in a night. So I work, right? Batman remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The city, once swallowed in darkness, was flickering back to life, but the storm wasn't completely over. He could feel it in his bones. Something else was coming. It always did. Thanks for the assist, Batman finally said, his voice soft but firm. Flash grinned. You know, Bruce, you could try saying that with a little more enthusiasm, maybe even crack a smile. Without missing a beat, Batman shot him a deadpan look. Done, push your luck. Flash chuckled and took a few steps back, stretching his leg. And I guess I'll head back to Central City. Things over there aren't nearly as exciting as Gotham, but I've got my own messes to clean up. As he prepared to speed off, Flash hesitated, turning back to Batman. You know, for what it is worth, you ran out so bad at the teamwork thing. You should try it more often. Might do wonders for that brooding image of yours. Batman didn't respond immediately. Instead, he considered the words carefully, the usual weight of solitude feeling a little lighter tonight. I will keep that in mind. With a quick salute, Flash vanished in a streak of red lightning, leaving nothing but a gust of wind in his wake. Batman stood alone once more, the familiar silence of Gotham settling around him. He activated his communicator, now that the city's scan systems were restored, and called Alfred. The city is safe. I am coming back. Later, in the Batcave, Bruce Wayne sat in front of the Bat-computer, reviewing the night sun event. The conductor's devices were being dismantled by the Ystapai, and Gotham's Satin power grid was stabilizing. But there was something about the conductor's final words that gnawed at him. Rebuilt, reset order. Bruce tapped a few keys, pulling up files and blueprints related to the devices the conductor had used. He traced the energy readings back to their origin, running simulations to figure out how such a massive surge could be generated and controlled. The conductor's tech was advanced, far more advanced than what most of Gotham's criminal underworld could muster. He had been a genius, yes, but the design ... it wasn't he just hit. Master Wayne, Alfred Saw's voice broke the silence as he approached. I must say, your collaboration with the Flash was rather effective. Might we see more of these team-ups in the future? Bruce glanced at Alfred, his lips twitching into the faintest shadow of a smile. It worked tonight. Indeed it did, though. If I may, sir, you seem preoccupied. The conductor may have been mad, but he's no longer a threat. It sounds not him, Alfred. Bruce said, his voice low. It's him what he was working on. This tech gets done beyond anything we've seen in Gotham. There's more to this than just one man. Alfred raised an eyebrow. Do you suspect another player behind the scene? Maybe someone provided him with the resources, or at least the knowledge. This wasn't just about Gotham's power grid. It was about control on a level we haven't seen before. Bruce's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up schematics and intercepted communications from the days leading up to the blackout. There was a pattern here, but it was buried deep. Whoever was behind this had covered their tracks. Well, I don't like where this is going, Bruce muttered, more to himself than to Alfred. I am sure you will unravel it, sir. You always do, Alfred replied, his voice reassuring. Batman stood, the weight of the night said, events still heavy on his mind. Gotham's light had been restored, but shadows remained. The conductor had been just one piece of a larger puzzle, and Bruce wasn't going to stop until he had the full picture. As he prepared to head out again, Alfred offered a small smile. And might I suggest, Master Wayne, that you take a night off at some point? You've earned it. Bruce smirked slightly, the idea of a night off, almost laughable. I'll think about it. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew the answer. There would be no rest. Not yet. With a final glance at the Bat-computer, Bruce descended into the shadows, Gotham waiting for him once again. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The air in Central City crackled with energy as lightning arced across the night sky. Barry Allen, better known as the Flash, raced through the streets, his mind focused entirely on the villain he was chasing. Reverse Flash. The streets blurred beneath his feet, a streak of red and yellow twisting through the city as the two speedsters zipped between skyscrapers, their movements too fast for the human eye to follow. Reverse Flash was grinning, his sinister eyes locked on Barry. All right, come on, Barry, catch me if you can. Barry's heart pounded in his chest, his breath sharp with every step. He could feel the edges of the Speed Force buzzing around him, that familiar energy that allowed him to move faster than anyone could ever imagine. But tonight, something felt different. A reverse flash had led him to a place in the city that he didn't recognize, a part of the skyline that seemed to shimmer with an odd, unsettling glow. "You won. Getaway this time," Barry shouted, pushing himself faster. But just as he prepared to make his move, Reverse Flash turned, laughing as his foot smashed into the ground, sending a shockwave rippling through the street. Barry's eyes widened in horror as the ground cracked beneath him, and suddenly, the world around him began to warp. Time itself seemed to bend, the buildings stretching and twisting in impossible ways. The air grew dense, charged with an energy that felt like it was tearing at the seams of reality. "Barry Allen," Reverse Flash hissed, his grin widening as he stood in the epicenter of the disturbance. Before Barry could react, the rift opened, a swirling vortex of light and shadow burst from the ground, engulfing them both. Barry felt the pull of the speed force drag him into the rift, the sensation of being torn apart and reassembled all at once overwhelming him. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what had happened, but all he could see was the blinding light swallowing him whole. Barry landed hard on a concrete rooftop, his vision spinning as he struggled to regain his balance. He groaned, pulling himself to his feet, his head pounding with the remnants of whatever Reverse Flash had done. When he looked around, he realized this wasn't Teschel City anymore. The skyline was familiar, but different, darker, grimmer. It was Gotham City. "How did I end up here?" Barry muttered, rubbing the back of his head. He shook off the dizziness, his instincts kicking in. The air here was thick with tension, a palpable weight that made his skin crawl. It was Gotham, but not his Gotham. There was something wrong with the way the city looked, like it was fractured somehow. A shadow moved in the distance, darting between buildings. Barry tensed, recognizing the silhouette, instantly Batman. Barry raced toward the figure, his speed cutting through the night like a knife. As he neared, he called out, "Direct Bruce. I got a problem." But when the figure turned, it wasn't Bruce Wayne, not the Bruce Wayne Barry knew. This Batman was different. His armor was darker, bulkier, with jagged edges and a menacing design that screamed intimidation. His eyes glowed red beneath the cowl, and his mouth curled into a snarl. "Who are you?" Barry asked, slowing to a stop, his heart sinking as he realized this wasn't his friend. The Batman in front of him stepped forward, his voice cold and devoid of any warmth. "Terry, I am vengeance. I am the Knight." Barry swallowed hard. This wasn't Tyrion the Bruce he knew. This was an alternate version of Batman 1 from a universe where Gotham had pushed him too far, where Bruce Wayne had lost all hope and given in to the darkness. His every move oozed malice, his very presence radiating an aura of fear. "I don't know who you think you are, Flash," the dark Batman growled. "Oh, hi, but this Gotham is mine, and no one leaves alive." Without warning, the dark Batman lunged forward, throwing a barrage of gadgets and fists at Barry. Barry barely dodged the attack, his instincts kicking in as he moved at super speed. But even at his fastest, he could feel the power and brutality of this Batman's attack. This wasn't the Bruce who fought for justice. This was a man consumed by his own darkness, willing to kill without a second thought. "Bruce, stop," Barry shouted, trying to reason with him as he dodged another strike. "Here I am, not your enemy." The dark Batman saw this, connected with Barry, sending him skidding across the rooftop. Barry groaned, the pain searing through his ribs. He had fought with Bruce countless times, but this was something different. There was no restraint, no code. This Batman was ruthless. As Barry struggled to catch his breath, the dark Batman stood over him, his shadow looming. "Yes, there is no Bruce Wayne here. Only his there, only the Bat. Death." Before the final blow could land, a familiar voice cut through the night. "That is enough." The dark Batman paused, his head snapping up as another figure stepped out of the shadow. This Batman was different. His armor lighter, more refined, with a symbol of hope emblazoned across his chest. His eyes were sharp, filled with determination, but they lacked the same malevolent glow. Barry blinked in surprise. The new Batman nodded, his expression calm yet focused. "Barry, it's me." The two Batmen stood facing each other, the contrast between them stark and undeniable. One was a symbol of darkness, the other of justice. Barry could feel the tension in the air, a tension that only grew as the rift in time flickered above them, pulsating with chaotic energy. "I am here to help," the lighter Batman said, his voice steady as he looked at his darker counterpart. "Here, this isn't who you are." The dark Batman sneered. I know exactly who I am. No, the lighter, Batman said, stepping forward. You hadn't forgotten. You've lost your way. Barry watched as the two versions of Bruce stared each other down, the weight of their confrontation hanging in the balance. The time rift had brought them together, but it was up to them to decide whether they would destroy each other or find a way to fix the fracture. The night grew heavier as Barry, bruised but determined, stood beside the lighter Batman. They had to find a way to fix this before the rift tore reality apart. The dark Batman's red eyes flickered with hatred as he drew a batarang from his belt. There's nothing left to fix. This world belongs to the Bat, all of them. Barry's heart raced. The rift above them pulsed violently, a growing storm of chaotic energy that threatened to consume everything. He had to think fast, had to find a way to stop this before it was too late. But the longer he stood there, the more he realized that this wasn't just about stopping the dark Batman. This was about Bruce, his Bruce, and helping him find himself again. Barry turned to the lighter Batman. All of you, I think it's simplifying your worst fears, your darkest impulses. The lighter Batman's jaw clenched. So what do? We stop it together, Barry said. But first, we have to help him. The dark Batman laughed, his voice dripping with malice. Help me there. Snow helping me flash this city is mine. Barry could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. Time was running out, and the longer they stood in this fractured version of Gotham, the closer the entire reality came to collapsing. He wasn't just fighting a battle against an evil version of Batman. He was racing against the clock to save the very fabric of the multiverse. The dark Batman sneered, the red glow of his eyes casting an eerie light over his face. I don't need your help. I've already made my peace with what I am. This city, this world is better under my rule. Barry felt a shiver run down his spine. The rift in time had pulled this darker version of Bruce to the surface, amplifying every twisted thought and fear Bruce had ever buried. He couldn't fix this alone. He needed his Bruce, the Bruce who still believed in hope and justice, to step up. Bruce, Barry called out, turning to the lighter Batman. You have to confront him. You know him better than anyone. The lighter Batman clenched his fists, his jaw tightening beneath his cowl. There he's not me. He's not just a possibility. But he could be you, Barry said, his voice low. That's why this is happening. You've always struggled the line between darkness and light, and the rift in time is exploiting that. You have to remind him and yourself what it means to be Batman. The lighter Batman stared at his darker counterpart, the two versions of Bruce locked in an unspoken struggle. The dark Batman's eyes burned with hatred, while the lighter Batman's gaze was filled with determination. I want to let you destroy everything, the lighter Batman said, his voice firm. Our Gotham is a symbol of hope. You've forgotten that. The dark Batman laughed, the sound cold and hollow. Help there's no hope in this world. Only fear. Fear is what keeps Gotham in line. Fear is what keeps me in control. The lighter Batman stepped forward, his cape billowing in the wind. Fear isn't tree control, it's not the weapon, and when you rely on it, you lose sight of what truly matters, protecting the people. The dark Batman's expression twisted into a snarl. And you think you re so righteous done to you, but we read the same. You and I, you read just too weak to admit it. No, the lighter Batman said, his voice steady. We read not the same. I made a choice to believe in something better, and I won trade. Let you take that away from me. The tension between the two Batmen was palpable, the air crackling with the energy of the rift above them. Barry watched as they circled each other, their movements precise control. This wasn't just a physical battle, it was a battle of ideologies, of identity. Barry's mind raced, trying to think of a way to stop the confrontation before it escalated. He knew that if the two Batmen clashed, the time rift would only grow stronger, feeding off the chaos and confusion. They needed to find a way to come together, to merge their fragmented selves back into one cohesive whole. But how? As the two Batmen prepared to strike, Barry felt a surge of energy ripple through the ground. The rift above them pulsed, its chaotic energy growing stronger with every passing second. He could see the fabric of reality beginning to warp around them, Gotham's skyline shifting and twisting in ways that defied logic. Barry, the lighter Batman said, his voice calm but urgent. The rift is getting worse. If we don't fix this soon, everything will collapse. I know, Barry replied, his heart pounding in his chest. But we can. Just fight our way out of this. We need to. Suddenly, the dark Batman lunged forward, his fists swinging toward the lighter Batman with brutal precision. The lighter Batman countered, their movements a blur of punches, kicks, and evasion. It was like watching two sides of the same coin, each one trying to prove their dominance over the other. Barry gritted his teeth. He couldn't let this go on. Terry, stop. He shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. This isn't here the way. Neither Batman listened. The fight between them only intensified, each blow sending shockwaves through the fractured city. Barry could feel the tremors beneath his feet, the rift and time feeding off the conflict. He had to act. In a split-second decision, Barry tapped into the speed force, his body vibrating with the energy as he accelerated toward the two Batmen. Moving faster than a blink, he positioned himself between them, his arms outstretched to block their blows. Enough, Barry shouted, his voice ringing out with authority. This ends now. Both Batmen froze, their fists inches away from Barry's fate. The dark Batman's eyes glowed with fury, while the lighter Batman's expression was one of shock. You think you can stop this flash? The dark Batman hissed.
You don't understand, bullshit.
I understand perfectly, Barry replied, his voice steady. Agree, you were both part of the same person. And that's why this fight is tearing reality apart. You read two halves of a whole that can exist without each other. The lighter Batman's eyes narrowed. Fair, what are you saying, Barry? Barry turned to him, his expression serious. The only way to fix this is for you to accept all parts of yourself, even the darkness. You can't keep running from it. You have to face it head on. The lighter Batman looked conflicted, his brow furrowing beneath his cowl. But if I accept him, if I accept the darkness, what happens to the man I've become? You don't lose who you are. Barry said softly, you become whole, stronger, more balanced. But you have to make the choice. The dark Batman scoffed. You really think I am just going to roll over and let you take control? I am the Bat I've survived because I embraced the darkness. Barry shook his head. You've survived, but you've lost everything that makes you who you are. You've become a tyrant, consumed by fear. That's not survival, that's defeat. The dark Batman's sized fists tightened, his jaw clenched. For a moment, Barry thought he would attack again. But then, something shifted in the dark Batman's eyes, a flicker of doubt, of recognition. The lighter Batman stepped forward, his gaze locked on his darker counterpart. I want to let you destroy what we've built. You're a part of me. Yes, but you don't define me. The dark Batman snarled, but his movement slowed as if the fight had been drained from him. You think you were better than me? You think you were stronger? I think I've learned, the lighter Batman said, his voice calm and steady. I've learned that it's not just about fear, it's just about hope too, and that's what makes me strong. The dark Batman's shoulders slumped, the red glow in his eyes dimming. Barry watched, holding his breath as the two Batmen stood face to face, the tension between them slowly dissipating. The rift above them pulsed one last time, its chaotic energy flickering as the two versions of Bruce Wayne finally came to an understanding. The lighter Batman reached out, placing a hand on his darker counterpart's shoulder. You were a part of me, he said quietly. The dark Batman's eyes flickered, and for a moment, he looked human, vulnerable. Side-eye, I thought fear was all I had left. It's not, the lighter Batman said. And with those words, the rift in time began to close. Barry could feel the energy around them shifting, the warped reality slowly stabilizing as the two Batmen became one. The darkness that had consumed the darker Batman began to fade, merging with the light until there was only one Bruce Wayne, left, a man who had faced his deepest fears and come out the other side stronger. The city around them returned to normal, the fractured skyline smoothing out as the rift finally sealed shut. Barry let out a breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding the weight of the moment lifting from his shoulder. It's an race. His voice quiet. Bruce, the real Bruce, turned to him, his expression tired but resolute. It's archaic. Barry nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You did it. Bruce looked out over the city, his eyes thoughtful. Fair number. We did it together. Barry felt a surge of relief wash over him. The multiverse had been saved, the rift in time healed. But more importantly, Bruce had faced the darkest parts of himself and come through stronger, more whole than ever before. As they stood together on the rooftop, the night calm once more, Barry knew that their bond as friends and as heroes had been tested and forged anew. And somewhere, deep within the shadows of Gotham, a faint glimmer of hope remained. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The city hummed with the electric pulse of life as Barry Allen, known to the world as the Flash, zipped through the streets of Central City. A blur of red lightning. He weaved between cars and startled pedestrians, moving faster than the eye could track. There was a light drizzle tonight, the kind that made the pavement gleam beneath the streetlights, but it never slowed him down. If anything, it sharpened his senses. He had just taken down a group of small-time bank robbers, nothing serious, just thugs looking to make a quick score. The sound of distant sirens echoed behind him as the cops arrived to mop up. It felt routine at this point, the kind of thing that hardly required a superhero, but a job was a job, and Central City was his home. As he stopped on a rooftop to catch his breath, a high-pitched beep echoed from his communicator, pulling his attention away from the sparkling city skyline. His suit, linked to the entire Justice League network, never buzzed without reason. Barry glanced down at the small device on his wrist, expecting a mission update or a check-in from one of the League members. Instead, the message flashing across the screen made his heart stop for a second. "I know who you really are," flashed. The message was simple, almost anticlimactic in its delivery. Yet the implications hit him like a speeding truck. Barry's stomach tightened as he read it again, hoping he was mistaken. Whoever had sent this knew his identity. A cool wind swept across the rooftop, but Barry's body was already cold from the sudden rush of panic. Keeping his identity a secret wasn't just about protecting himself, it was about protecting everyone he cared about. Iris, his family, his friends. If the wrong people found out, his mind raced with possibility. He activated his communicator, Caitlin Sisko. His voice was steady, but his mind was anything but nothing, just static. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. The message hadn't come through any of the lead channels. This wasn't someone on the inside. He checked the sender's signature, but found nothing. It was expertly scrubbed, no location, no traceable data. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. He needed help, and there was only one person in the world whose paranoia matched his own in situations like this. Central City faded into the background as Barry sped across the country in what felt like the blink of an eye. His destination, Gotham, the city of shadows and fear, was as different from Central City as night was from day. Where Central City sparkled with energy and progress, Gotham brooded its towering buildings, casting long, jagged shadows over dark alleys. Even now, with its residents tucked away for the night, the city felt alive in a different, dangerous way. Barry slowed as he approached the outskirts of the city, allowing the familiar, oppressive atmosphere to wash over him. He wasn't scared of Gotham. His speed made fear an afterthought, but there was something about the place that unnerved him. It was as if the city itself fed on fear, soaking it up and keeping it alive in the fog that rolled off the river. He arrived at Wayne Manor and took a moment to catch his breath. It didn't matter how fast you were. Stepping into Bruce Wayne's world always felt like walking into someone else's nightmare. A dark figure appeared at the edge of the grand estate, a tall silhouette framed by the dim glow of the moon. Not openly greeted. "You got here fast," Bruce said. His voice as deep and gruff as ever. "He didn't turn around. He didn't need to." "It's what I do," Barry replied, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. His nerves were still frayed from the message, but Bruce always had this way of making you feel like you were a kid asking for help on a school project. The Batcave loomed before them, the hidden entrance yawning open like the mouth of a cave monster ready to swallow them whole. They descended into the Batcave, the cool, sterile air of the subterranean lair, a stark contrast to the world above. Monitors lined the walls, displaying endless streams of data crime reports, weather patterns, satellite feeds, and more. The Dark Knights, tools of the trade. Barry had been down here a few times before, but each visit was a reminder of how different their approaches were. He ran fast. Bruce analyzed, dissected, and planned every move with meticulous precision. So Bruce said, sitting down at his massive console, fingers flying over the keys. You get a message and now you were here. He glanced sideways at Barry, his expression unreadable beneath the cowl. Tell me everything. Barry took a deep breath and relayed the message, the details still raw in his mind. He didn't hold back. He couldn't afford to when he finished. Bruce's face was as still as stone, his eyes narrowing slightly. Barry couldn't tell if Bruce was thinking or if he already knew more than he was letting on. They're retargeting your identity, Bruce said, finally turning back to the screen. That's dangerous for you, for the League. Anyone who can get to you can get to the rest of us. He began pulling up satellite scans and running deep web searches. What do we do? Barry asked. Bruce's fingers didn't stop. We find them before they find you. Barry felt the weight of the situation more heavily. Now if his identity was exposed, it wouldn't just be his life turned upside down. The Justice League depended on their anonymity, their ability to operate in the shadows when necessary. If someone knew him, they might know others. Clark, Diana, even Bruce. Any leads? Barry asked, moving closer to the monitors, though he knew Bruce probably wouldn't have anything concrete just yet. Too early to say, Bruce replied, voice low and even, but we will start with the dark web. The message was sent through encrypted channels. Whoever did this is smart. Barry nodded. Smart wasn't all good. Smart meant they weren't dealing with a typical villain. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the possibility that someone had found out who he was, or that Bruce was treating this like a real threat. Hours passed in silence, the two heroes working side by side. Barry watched as Bruce delved deeper into the labyrinthine web of criminal networks and data trails, each led colder than the last. Frustration gnawed at Barry, his mind racing far faster than his body was allowed to in this confined space. Barry finally broke the silence. He rarely used Bruce's real name, especially when in costume, but this situation felt personal enough to warrant it. What if they do know who I am? What if they expose me? I've worked so hard to keep everyone safe. Bruce stopped typing for a moment, his eyes flicking toward Barry. You're worried about Iris, he said, a statement, not a question. Barry nodded. Yeah, and everyone else. Batman leaned back in his chair, the glow of the monitors casting dark shadows across his face. This is the price we pay. The masks aren't just to protect us. They were to protect the people we love. His voice softened just a touch fast. But sometimes even speed isn't enough. Barry felt a pit open in his stomach. Bruce had always been more of a pessimist, but his words hit home in a way that Barry wasn't ready for. He had seen Bruce lose people. He had seen Bruce turn cold and hard after those losses. That wasn't something Barry ever wanted for himself. But we'll find them, Bruce added, snapping Barry out of his thoughts. We always do. Barry didn't respond. He knew Bruce meant it, but that didn't stop the fear from creeping in. As dawn broke over Gotham, Barry was no closer to answers. He stood at the edge of the Batcave, watching the city slowly come to life under the pale morning sun. His legs itched to run, but he knew that this problem wouldn't be solved by speed alone. Bruce approached, his steps silent despite the heavy boots. I've narrowed down some leads, he said, holding up a small tee to drive. We'll start here. It's a trail, but it's thin. Barry took the drive and nodded, his resolve hardening. Let sun go catch them. The rest of the story will continue in the next part. Here's the continuation of Speed and Darkness. Gotham's industrial district was a maze of abandoned warehouses, towering smokestacks, and derelict train yards. The kind of place where criminals felt at home, far from the prying eyes of the law. Barry followed Bruce in the Batmobile, his own nerves on edge. Bruce had tracked down a location where the Dark Hand was rumored to operate a hidden safe house deep within the heart of the industrial sprawl. Stay alert, Bruce's voice crackled through Barry's earpiece as they arrived. The Batmobile rolled to a silent stop, the hum of its engines barely audible in the thick, damp air. Barry looked around, his eyes scanning the darkness, which seemed to cling to every surface in Gotham. He couldn't help but feel out of place in this city. It was Bruce Sade, a world one of shadows and silent fear. Together they approached a decrepit building, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. To anyone else, it looked abandoned, but Barry knew better. Bruce never came to a fight without being sure of his target. Ready? Bruce asked, his voice low, though Barry could feel the intensity in his words. Barry nodded. Let's do this. They entered the building, moving swiftly through narrow, dimly lit corridors. Bruce led the way, his every step silent, his every movement precise. Barry, despite his super speed, felt clumsy next to the Dark Knight, as a grace in such confined spaces. The interior of the building was dark and musty, filled with the remnants of a long-forgotten past. Old machinery covered in dust lined the walls, casting eerie shadows in the faint light filtering through cracks in the roof. "This place is a labyrinth," Barry whispered as they moved deeper inside. "Are you sure?" Bruce held up a hand, signaling for silence. Barry followed his gaze and saw a faint red light blinking at the end of the hallway. "Security system," Bruce muttered.
There I am.
Barry's heart raced. This was it. The dark hand was just ahead. He readied himself for confrontation, adrenaline surging through his veins. But Bruce remained calm, his movements controlled and deliberate as he approached the security terminal. With a few swift keystrokes, Bruce hacked into the system, disabling the security grid. The red light blinked out, and the hallway fell into deeper silence. "They won, Juno rewritten," here Bruce said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But stay sharp. They'll have more than just cameras." Barry nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and unease. He trusted Bruce. No one was better at this kind of covert operation, but the stakes felt impossibly high. If they failed here, if the Dark Hand managed to escape with the information they had. The two heroes moved forward, entering a large open room. It was filled with computers, monitors, and surveillance equipment. Clearly, this was more than just a safe house. It was a hub of operations, and the Dark Hand had eyes everywhere. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in black, with a sinister mask that hid his face. "Batman," the figure said, his voice cold and metallic in the flash. "I've been expecting you." Barry tensed, ready to move, but Bruce remained still, his eyes locked on the masked figure. "You've made a mistake," Bruce said, his voice steady. "Coming after us, coming after it." The figure chuckled. "You think I fear you, Batman? I've spent years studying your weaknesses." In the flash, he turned his masked gaze toward Barry. "Do you really think your speed can save you when I hold all the cards?" Barry felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't true just a villain with a grudge. This was someone who had planned for this, someone who had studied them, learned their patterns, their vulnerabilities. "Who are you?" Barry demanded, his voice louder than he intended. "I am the one who will expose the truth," the figure replied. "The truth about you, about your precious Justice League. The world will see you for what you really are, frauds hiding behind masks." Before Barry could respond, the figure pressed a button on a control panel. Instantly, the monitors around the room flickered to life, displaying images of Barry both as the Flash and as Barry Allen. Footage from his life, his job at the Central City Police Department, his interactions with Iris, every detail of his private life laid bare. "Oh," Barry whispered, his blood running cold. "How?" The figure's eyes gleamed behind his mask. "I told you, Flash, I know everything." Bruce was already moving, his fingers flying across the control panel, trying to disable the feed. But the figure wasn't tied to another button, and the room was plunged into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the monitors, still displaying Barry Ed's life like a twisted slideshow. "They'll know soon enough," the figure said, his voice echoing through the darkness. "The world will know." Barry's mind raced panic, threatening to overtake him. His identity, his life was all about to be exposed. He couldn't truly let that happen, but before he could act, Bruce's voice cut through the chaos. "Barry, stay focused." Barry took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He wasn't just a man running from a threat. He was the Flash, and he had Bruce Wayne at his side. "Dawn, let him rattle you," Bruce said, his voice as calm and measured as ever. "We're not out of this yet." Barry nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. Bruce was right. They could still win this. They just had to be smarter, faster. With a burst of speed, Barry moved across the room, disabling the power supply to the monitors in an instant. The images of his life blinked out, replaced by darkness. He felt a small sense of relief, but the fight was far from over. "Nice trick," the figure said, his voice still cold and mocking. "But you can outrun the truth, Flash, and you certainly can. Outrun." Suddenly, the room was filled with motion. Figures emerged from the shadows, dozens of them, all wearing the same black uniforms and masks as their leader. Barry and Bruce were surrounded. "Looks like they brought backup," Barry said, glancing at Bruce. Bruce didn't respond. Instead, He pulled out a smoke pellet and threw it to the ground, filling the room with thick, choking smoke. In the confusion, he moved with the precision of a predator, taking down enemies one by one. Barry, meanwhile, used his speed to disorient the attackers, dodging blows and delivering quick, precise strikes. But there were too many of them, and the room was too small for him to truly unleash his full potential. "We need to get out of here," Barry said, dodging a punch from one of the masked men. Bruce was already moving toward the exit, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of their mysterious leader. But the figure had vanished, leaving his army to deal with the two heroes. "Go," Bruce said, his voice barely audible through the smoke. "I'll handle that." Barry hesitated for a moment, torn between helping Bruce and following his lead. But Bruce's voice was firm now. "Barry." With a final glance at his friend, Barry sped toward the exit, his heart pounding in his chest. He hated leaving Bruce behind, but he knew that Batman could handle himself. Besides, they had bigger problems to deal with. As he burst out of the building and into the cold Gotham night, Barry saw a mind race. Whoever the Dark Hand was, they had gone to incredible lengths to expose him, but how had they learned so much about him and why? He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Barry bolted through the streets of Gotham, the night air cold and biting against his skin. His mind was racing even faster than his body. The encounter at the warehouse had left him rattled. Someone had come closer to exposing his true identity than he ever thought possible, and now that knowledge was out there, waiting to be used against him, he couldn't shake the images of his life flashing on those monitors. The private moments, the ones that mattered most, his relationship with Iris, his work at the precinct, they were all targets. Now, he pushed himself harder, his legs moving faster, but no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't outrun the fear settling in his chest. Bruce was still back at the warehouse, facing down the remnants of the Dark Hand. Barry had wanted to stay, to fight by his side, but Batman had insisted he leave. Barry hated that Bruce always seemed to carry the burden alone, but he trusted his judgment. His feet pounded the pavement as he reached the outskirts of Gotham, the city's solid towering buildings fading into the distance behind him. He was heading back to Central City. He needed to regroup, figure out his next move. There had to be a way to track down this mysterious figure before things spiraled further out of control. When he reached the edge of Central City, he slowed to a jog, allowing himself a moment to breathe. The familiar sights of his home came into view, the comforting lights of the city guiding him back. But something felt different now. The city no longer felt like the safe haven it once had. The threat loomed over him, like a shadow he couldn't shake. As he moved through the streets, his communicator buzzed again. Barry tensed, half expecting another threat, another taunt from the shadowy figure, but this time it was Bruce. Barry Bruce's voice was gruff but steady. "I've dealt with the soldiers. We need to talk." "I am heading back to the precinct," now Barry replied, keeping his voice low as he dodged a few late-night pedestrians. "Meet me there." "I'll be there," Bruce said. His voice clipped. "We need to move quickly." Barry ended the call and picked up the pace, making his way to the Central City Police Department. His thoughts raced as he ran. The Dark Hand wasn't told, just another villain of the weak threat. This was calculated. Whoever was behind this had gone to extreme lengths to get inside his life, to turn his secret into a weapon. When Barry reached the precinct, he found Bruce already waiting. The Batplane was cloaked above, hovering just out of sight in the sky. Bruce stood in the shadows by the entrance, his cape draped over his shoulders, blending into the darkness. "You took care of them?" Barry asked, his voice still tinged with unease. "They were not a threat anymore," Bruce said, "but we were far from death. Whoever that masked figure was, they were operating on a different level." Barry nodded, running a hand through his hair. He knew everything. "My whole life, my identity, I've never seen anything like it. He's been watching me for years." Bruce's eyes narrowed, his mind already working through the next step. "They had surveillance on you. They've been tracking your movements, your personal life. It's not random. They know what they were doing." Barry clenched his fists, the frustration bubbling up inside him. "I don't know how they got so close, how they found out about me, about Iris. I've been careful." Bruce cut him off, his tone sharp. "Careful isn't tough, not when someone is willing to go to these lengths. We need to figure out who they are and what their endgame is." Barry took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He faced threats before, powerful enemies, dangerous situations, but this felt different. This was personal, and it terrified him. "What's our next move?" Barry asked. looking to Bruce for guidance. He knew that if anyone could untangle this web of lies and deception, it was Batman. Let us trace some of their operations back to Metropolis, Bruce said, his voice low. They have been operating in the shadows, building a network of information on every member of the League. You were to their only target. Barry saw his heart sank. You think they know about Clark, Diana? It's possible, Bruce said grimly. We need to assume they do. But they went after you first. They reusing you as leverage. Barry paced in front of the precinct, the weight of the situation sinking in. If the Dark Hand had information on the entire Justice League, then the stakes were far higher than he initially realized. It wasn't just about him anymore. The entire team was vulnerable. We need to warn them, Barry said, his voice resolute. If they come for Clark or Diane. They won't, Bruce interrupted, his tone decisive, not yet. They went after you for a reason. We were going to figure out what that reason is and shut them down before they can move on to anyone else. Barry nodded, his mind racing through the possibilities. He had always felt a sense of responsibility as the Flash, but this was different. This wasn't about stopping a bank robbery or catching a criminal. This was about protecting the people he loved, his friends, his family, the League. What do you need me to do? Barry asked, his voice steady now, his resolve solidifying. Bruce glanced at him, the faintest hint of approval in his eye. We were going to Metropolis. I have a contact there who can help us track down the remaining pieces of this puzzle. They ready? Barry didn't hesitate. Let's go. In a blur of motion, they were on their way, Barry using his speed to cut through the night, and Bruce following close behind in the Batplane. The journey to Metropolis was a blur of thoughts and emotions for Barry. He couldn't help but think of Iris, of how vulnerable she was if his secret ever got out. But he trusted Bruce. They would stop this before it spiraled out of control. When they arrived in Metropolis, the city was still bathed in the warm glow of evening light. The tall skyscrapers and bustling streets were a sharp contrast to the dark, foreboding nature of Gotham. It was a city that symbolized hope. Thanks to its greatest protector, Superman, Bruce led the way to a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city, far from the prying eyes of the Daily Planet or the local authorities. This was where his contact waited. As they entered the dimly lit office, a figure stepped out from the shadow. It was none other than Lois Lane, one of the few civilians Bruce trusted with delicate matters. Her expression was serious, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes as she looked between Barry and Bruce. Batman, Flash, she greeted, her voice steady. I got your message. What's going on? Barry filled her in, quickly explaining the threat from the Dark Hand, the exposure of his identity, and the danger it posed to the entire Justice League. Lois listened carefully, her journalistic instincts kicking in. I've whispers about this group. They've been operating underground for a while, mostly staying out of the limelight. But recently, their activity has ramped up. I can help you find them, but you will have to move fast. They good at covering their track. Barry looked to Bruce, who gave a slight nod. We'll move fast. Lois handed over a file filled with information she had been gathering on the Dark Hand. This might help, but be careful. They've been digging into a lot of people's lives, not just superheroes. Barry flipped through the file, his mind absorbing the information. This group had been operating in the shadows for years, collecting data on metahumans, vigilantes, and even politicians. They were playing the long game, and Barry was their latest pawn. We'll find them, Bruce said, his voice filled with quiet determination. And when we do, they won't see us coming. Barry felt a surge of confidence with Bruce by his side and Lois providing intel. They had a real chance of shutting this down before things got any worse. As they prepared to leave, Lois gave them one final warning. Be careful out there. They were dangerous, and if they've been watching you this closely, they were not afraid to get personal. Barry nodded, feeling the weight of her words. This fight wasn't just about protecting his identity. It was about protecting everyone who mattered to him. As they stepped back out into the night, Barry felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He wasn't going to let the Dark Hand win. He wasn't going to let them expose him or the League or anyone else. It was time to finish this. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. It was a quiet night in Gotham, the kind of night that rarely came to the city. Batman was perched on the edge of a rooftop, the cold wind tugging at the edges of his cape. The soft hum of the Batcave's communication system vibrated through his cowl, signaling a message coming through. It was from the Justice League. Bruce, the familiar voice of Barry Allen, better known as Flash, echoed in his ear. "We are a situation in Central City." Batman's eyes narrowed. "What's going on?" "People are not themselves," Flash replied, his voice laced with tension. "They were doing things they wouldn't normally do, like they were being controlled or manipulated somehow. I am pretty sure it's sign mind control, but it's more advanced than anything I've ever seen." Batman was already moving before Flash had finished. He knew Central City was a breeding ground for metacriminals, but mind control was a different beast entirely. It required precision, intelligence, and power traits that concerned him far more than brute strength. "I am on my way," Batman said. Cutting off the transmission, he activated the Batmobile remotely, the sleek black vehicle roaring to life a few blocks away. Within moments, he was speeding through Gotham's streets toward the Justice League teleportation point. Flash was waiting when Batman arrived, his usual cocky grin absent. Instead, his face was drawn, eyes haunted by what he had seen. "Glad you're here," Flash said. "It's bad, Bruce. Real bad." "Show me," Batman replied, his voice calm and controlled. No matter the situation, his demeanor remained a steady anchor, even as Flash vibrated with nervous energy. Together, they made their way to the heart of the problem, a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Central City. But Batman knew better than to be fooled by appearances. If Flash had called him in, it was because the threat was serious. Inside, the air was thick with an unnatural stillness. A handful of civilians stood motionless in the center of the room, their eyes glassy and unfocused. As Batman scanned the area, his sharp gaze fell upon a figure seated in a chair, his head tilted back slightly, eyes closed as if he were in deep concentration. "That trusts him," Flash whispered, pointing at the man. "He calls himself the Architect." Batman's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors of a psychic capable of altering minds, bending reality within the confines of the human psyche. But those had only been whispers passed through the criminal underworld like ghost stories now. It seemed those rumors were all too real. "Stay close," Batman said. "We don't know the full extent of his ability." Flash nodded, but before they could move, the man's eyes snapped open. "The Architect said," his voice soft but commanding. Without warning, a wave of psychic energy surged toward them. Batman and Flash tried to react, but it was too late. Their bodies froze in place, and the world around them dissolved into a blinding light. When Batman's vision cleared, he found himself standing in a dark, twisted version of Gotham City. The buildings loomed overhead like towering monsters, their edges jagged and surreal. The sky above was a swirling mass of black clouds, lightning crackling through them intermittently. It was a place he recognized all too well, a distorted manifestation of his worst fear. Bruce's Flash voice echoed from somewhere nearby. "We were not in Central City anymore," Batman muttered, his mind already racing through the possibility. "We were in our minds. The Architect fused us together in a shared mental landscape." "Great," said, his voice shaking slightly. "Just what I needed, a front row seat to the inside of your head." But Batman wasn't listening. He was already analyzing their surroundings, searching for any clue as to how to escape. The Architect had them at a disadvantage, but Batman never believed in being helpless. There was always a way out, always. A figure appeared in the distance, and Batman tensed his instincts, screaming at him to prepare for a fight. But as the figure grew closer, he recognized it. Thomas and Martha Wayne. Flash must have seen them too, because he stopped dead in his tracks. "Bruce, is that?" "They were not real," Batman said coldly, trying to suppress the emotions, threatening to rise to the surface. "This is a manipulation." But as his parents walked toward him, their faces etched with the same peaceful smiles he remembered from his childhood, he could not help the flood of memories that washed over him. Their deaths, the gunshot echoing in the alley, the blood on the pavement, his greatest failure, the moment that had defined his entire existence. "Bruce, Martha," said her voice soft and filled with love. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to keep fighting. Come with the sun," Thomas added. "Let it go. Let the pain go." Batman's fists clenched at his sides. He knew this was a trap, a ploy to weaken his resolve. But it was so hard to resist, so hard to look into the faces of the people he had lost and not want to believe in the illusion. Flash stepped forward, placing a hand on Batman's shoulder. "This isn't you, real Bruce. I know it feels like it, but it's not. I know, Batman ground out, his voice strained, but that doesn't at all make it any easier. Before they could say anything more, the sky above them darkened, and a massive wave of shadows swept across the city. The illusion of Batman's appearance disappeared as quickly as it had come, replaced by a new nightmare Gotham in flame. Buildings collapsed in on themselves, the streets cracked open, and screams filled the air. Batman's heart raced as he watched the city he had sworn to protect fall into chaos. This is what you fear the most, isn't it? The architect's serum voice echoed around them. Failure, the collapse of everything you've built, everything you've fought for. Batman's jaw tightened. It's not real, he repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Flash looked around, panic rising in his chest. What do we do? How do we stop this? We don't have, Batman said. We endure it. We let the fear wash over us and remind ourselves that it's not real. Flash shook his head, his speedster instincts kicking in. That's not how I handle things. I run. I get away from it. That's not an option here, Batman replied. This is a test. The architect is trying to break us down by exploiting our fear. Just as Batman said the words, the ground beneath them shifted, and they were thrown into the air, tumbling through the abyss. When they landed, they found themselves in a new environment, Flash Central City. Except like Gotham, it wasn't the real Central City. This version was a chaotic blur, everything moving at lightning speed. People zipped past them too fast to see, and the buildings flickered in and out of existence as if they couldn't decide whether to stay or go. Flash, as breath caught in his throat. No. We ran my head now, aren't we? Looks that way, Batman replied, his voice steady. This is your fear, Barry. You need to face it. Flash's lines trembled as he looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. I can tell I'm not fast enough. Batman raised an eyebrow. Not fast enough. You were the fastest man alive. Flash shook his head. Not when it matters. Not when I need to be. Before Batman could respond, the world shifted again, and they found themselves standing in front of Flash's childhood home. The door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped out, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Mom, Flash whispered, his voice cracking. Mom, Flash whispered, his voice cracking as he stared at the figure stepping out of the house. Nora Ellen, the woman whose loss had haunted him for most of his life, stood there, looking as real as the last day he'd seen her. Her presence hit him like a freight train, flooding him with memories of a happier time, a time before his life had spiraled into chaos. Barry, she said, her voice gentle just as he remembered it. You were so fast, sweetheart. You were doing such great things. Flash took a shaky step forward, his heart pulling him toward her. I tried to save you. I wasn't fast enough. I couldn't. Nora's expression softened, and she reached out to him. You've always been fast enough, Barry. But sometimes, no matter how fast you are, you can try to change the path. Flash's legs felt like they were made of lead. He wanted to run to escape the pain of seeing his mother like this, knowing she wasn't real, but he couldn't tell. No, not. After all this time, Batman, standing just behind Flash, kept his distance, watching the scene unfold. He knew what this was. The architect was using Flash's deepest wound, just as he had tried to with Batman. But Bruce also knew that Flash had to face this alone. He couldn't be the one to save Barry from his own mind. You've spent so much of your life running, Nora continued, stepping closer to Flash, her presence warm and comforting. But what are you running from? Flash's eyes filled with tears. I am running from the fact that I couldn't save you, that I couldn't stop him. Thawne, Nora asked softly, her face becoming more solemn. You've let him define your fear, but what happened wasn't true. What? I should have been there, Flash shouted, his voice breaking. If I had been faster, if I had been stronger, you would still be alive. Nora reached out and touched his face, and Flash flinched at the sensation. It felt real, too real. You can save everyone, Barry. No one can. The words hit Flash like a punch to the gut. He had spent his entire life trying to outrun his guilt, his sense of failure. But hearing those words from his mother, even if she wasn't, real, was like a light piercing the darkness that had enveloped him for so long. Flash took a deep breath, his mind racing. I know that now. He glanced back at Batman, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. You don't have to be fast enough to fix the past, Nora said, her voice fading slightly as if she were beginning to dissolve. You just have to be fast enough to save the future. With those final words, she disappeared, leaving Flash standing there, his chest heaving with emotion. He wiped his eyes, turning to face Batman. You were right, Flash said, his voice steadier now. This is my fear, but it doesn't control me anymore. Batman stepped forward, his face unreadable beneath the cowl. Then let's finish this. As if on cue, the world around them began to warp, twisting and shifting like a kaleidoscope. The architect's sound voice echoed through the air, filled with rage. You think you've won? You think facing your fears makes you stronger? I control this world. I control your mind. The ground beneath their feet began to crumble, and the entire landscape dissolved into a chaotic swirl of colors and shape. Batman and Flash stood side by side, bracing themselves against the onslaught of psychic energy. He's trying to break us, Batman said, his voice calm and measured. But he doesn't realize that we're stronger together. Flash grinned, a spark of his usual confidence returning. Let's show him what we then got. Without hesitation, they launched into action. Flash took off in a blur of lightning, his speed creating a vortex of energy that cut through the shifting reality around them. Batman, ever the strategist, focused on analyzing the architect's mental constructs, searching for a weakness. As they fought their way through the collapsing mindscape, the architect's form materialized in front of them, a towering figure, his eyes glowing with psychic power. You cannot defeat me. The architect roared, his voice booming like thunder. I'm in your minds. I know every thought, every fear. You are nothing compared to my power. Batman narrowed his eyes. You may know our fears, but that doesn't give you control over us. Flash zipped around the architect, distracting him with bursts of speed, while Batman moved in close, his mind working at a rapid pace to unravel the psychic bonds holding them in this nightmare. You were vulnerable here, Batman said, his voice low and dangerous. This is your world, but it's also your prison. The architect's eyes flashed with fury, and he lashed out with a wave of psychic energy, sending Batman and Flash sprawling. But even as they hit the ground, they didn't give up. They had faced their fears, and now they were united in their purpose. Flash was back on his feet in an instant, his lightning crackling through the air as he darted toward the architect. You think you can control me? He shouted. You think you can break me with fear? I've lived with fear my whole life, and it's made me stronger. As Flash distracted the architect, Batman zeroed in on the psychic connection that bound them all together. He could feel the pressure in his mind, the subtle push and pull of the architect's influence. But there was something else there, something the architect hadn't accounted for. The connection wasn't one way. Just as the architect had access to their minds, Batman had access to his. And buried deep within the architect's consciousness was the same thing that had driven his need for control fear. The architect's own mind was fragile, built on layers of insecurity and fear of losing power. Batman seized on that weakness, pushing back with all his mental strength. You were not invincible, Batman said, his voice cutting through the architect's bravado. You were just as afraid as we are. The architect faltered, his psychic grip loosening for the briefest moment, but that was all Batman needed. Now Batman shouted, and Flash didn't hesitate. He unleashed a burst of speed, lightning arsting around him as he surged toward the architect. With a final thunderous punch, Flash struck the architect in the chest, sending a shockwave through the mindscape. The architect's form shattered, his psychic hold crumbling around the world flickered, and then imploded, dissolving into a sea of light. When Batman and Flash opened their eyes, they were back in the real world, lying on the cold floor of the warehouse. The architect lay unconscious nearby, his body limp and powerless. Batman slowly rose to his feet, his muscles aching from the strain of the psychic battle. Flash groaned, sitting up and rubbing his temples. Man, that was intense. Batman glanced at the architect, ensuring he was truly incapacitated before turning to Flash. You did well. Flash smiled, though. It was tired. Thanks, you too. I guess facing your fears isn't as bad when you've got someone watching your back. Batman's expression softened slightly. We make a good team. Flash stood, brushing himself off. Yeah, we do, though. Next time, let's try to avoid getting trapped in each other. Mine's hot. Agreed. As they stepped outside the warehouse, the first rays of dawn were breaking over Central City, casting the streets in a soft, golden light. The city was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just endured. Flash looked at Batman, his usual cocky grin starting to return. So what now, you heading back to Gotham? Batman nodded. There's always work to be done. Flash hesitated for a moment, then added, Bruce, we don't talk much. But after what we went through back there, I get it now. Why you do what you do. Batman didn't respond immediately, But when he finally spoke, there was a hint of warmth in his voice. "It's not easy, but it helps to know I am not doing it alone." Flash's grin widened. "Well, anytime you need a partner in crime fighting, you know where to find me." With that, Flash sped off in a blur of red lightning, leaving Batman standing alone in the quiet dawn. For a moment, he stood there, watching the city come to life before turning and heading toward the Batmobile. As he drove away, his mind drifted back to the maze they had just escaped. The architect had tried to break them to exploit their fears and insecurity, but instead he had only strengthened the bond between them. And for the first time in a long while, Batman allowed himself the smallest flicker of hope. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The night in Gotham was always darker than anywhere else, a suffocating blanket of shadow that clung to the city like a curse. The neon lights of the city barely penetrated the dense fog rolling off the harbor. To most, Gotham was a place of fear, a city of nightmares, and endless battle. To Batman, it was home a broken city that needed his watchful eyes tonight. However, something felt off. Bruce Wayne stood atop a crumbling rooftop, the wind whipping through his cape as he scanned the streets below. His fingers tightened around the edge of his cowl as he activated the sensors built into his mask. The reports had been piling up over the past few nights, crimes committed at impossible speeds, criminals claiming they were possessed by a red blur. Batman's instincts told him it was Flash, but something was wrong. Barry wouldn't just wreak havoc like this, not without reason. There was something darker at play. He narrowed his eyes, his tech picking up a faint streak of red lightning far below on the street. It was the same pattern, another robbery, another group of criminals disoriented and confused, another trail of red energy left behind. This was no coincidence, and if Flash was involved, there was no time to waste. Batman leaped from the rooftop, his grappling hook firing with a sharp hiss, pulling him into the darkened alleys below. Flash moved through Gotham, streets like a storm, his body a blur of motion as he scanned the area. Barry Allen's signed mind was racing faster than his feet. He'd been investigating the strange crimes for days now, but every lead had led to a dead end. Worse, he was starting to doubt his own abilities. Could it be him? Could something or someone be using his connection to the Speed Force to cause chaos? As he came to a stop in front of another broken store window, he felt the weight of doubt press against his chest. The criminals inside were unconscious, their bodies sprawled across the floor, but they had no idea what had hit them. Just like the others, they swore they hadn't done anything wrong. Flash clenched his fist. His thoughts were interrupted by a low growl that echoed through the alley. Flash's eyes widened as he felt a presence looming behind it. "Turn around slowly, Flash." The voice was cold, calculated, and unmistakable. Flash spun on his heel, and there stood Batman, cloaked in shadows, his eyes gleaming like two shards of ice. "You were making a mistake, Bruce," Flash said, his voice tense. Batman stepped closer, his hand reaching for the batarang at his side. Every piece of evidence points to you. Either you've lost control or something sub-controlling you." "That's not true. I've been trying to stop this someone essing framing me." Convenient excuse. The tension between them crackled like electricity. Flash fart. Heart raced, his mind scrambling to find a way to convince Bruce of his innocence. But Batman didn't trust easily, especially when it came to metahuman. Without warning, Batman lunged forward, throwing a batarang aimed at Flash's leg. The metal projectile whirred through the air, but Flash moved faster, dodging the attack in a blur of motion. He zipped to the other side of the alley, but Batman had anticipated it. The dark night unleashed a flurry of smoke pellets and sonic disruptors, each designed to slow Flash down. "I didn't want to hurt you, Bruce," Flash yelled, his voice echoing in the confined space. "You won T, get the chance," Batman growled back, tossing another set of gadgets designed to counter Flash's speed. Explosions of light and sound filled the alley as Flash zigzagged, trying to outmaneuver Batman, some relentless assault. Every time he tried to talk sense into Bruce, another trap was waiting for him. Batman's precision was terrifying, despite Flash's incredible speed. Bruce's intellect and planning had leveled the playing field. Flash barely had time to think as he dodged an impulse which crackled just inches from his face. "You can keep this up forever, Barry," Statman said, his voice calm even in the heat of battle. "If something's controlling you, I need to know before it's too late." "Nothing is controlling me," Flash shouted, his frustration boiling over. In a burst of speed, he ran circles around Batman, creating a vortex of wind strong enough to send Bruce tumbling backward. But Batman recovered quickly, firing his grappling hook at a nearby lamppost, swinging out of the vortex and landing on his feet. Flash came to a halt, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his forehead. Batman stood a few yards away, his stance solid, his gaze unyielding. The two heroes stared each other down, neither willing to back off. But then something strange happened. The air between them shimmered and a low hum filled the alley. Batman's eyes narrowed. Harry, what the hell? Before either of them could react, a figure stepped out of the shimmering air, a red blur with yellow lightning crackling around him. His face was twisted into a wicked grin. Well, this is disappointing, the figure sneered. Sally, I was hoping for a bit more bloodshed. Reverse Flash, Barry whispered, his voice filled with dread. Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, stood before them, his malevolent energy distorting the very fabric of the space around him. His presence made the air feel heavy, suffocating, as if reality itself was bending to his will. You both fell right into my little trap. Continued, his grin widening. I wanted to see just how easily I could tear you two apart. And guess what? It was easier than I thought. Flash's fists tightened as rage coursed through him. Try you were behind all this, you've been framing me. Of course, Thawne said with a mocking laugh. I wanted to watch Gotham's Knight and Central City, Golden Boy, tear each other apart. You two are so predictable. Batman always suspicious of everyone around him, and Flash too naive to see the danger in his own power. Batman's mind raced, analyzing every word, every move Thawne made. He'd been wrong about Barry. The Flash wasn't the threat. Thawne had been manipulating them both, turning their insecurities and fears against them. Why Thawne? Batman asked, his voice low and dangerous. Thawne's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure malice. Hi, 'cause I can. Because it's fun, and because I'm going to break both of you before I reshape this timeline into something far more interesting. The ground beneath their feet began to crack as Thawne summoned more of his Speed Force energy, warping the space around them. The alley twisted, bending in ways that defied logic. Batman and Flash struggled to maintain their balance as reality itself seemed to fracture. You were gonna pay for this, Flash growled, his eyes blazing with fury. Thawne only laughed, his form becoming a blur once again. Catch me if you can, Barry. And with that, Reverse Flash disappeared into the shattered night, leaving Batman and Flash to deal with the chaos he unleashed. The moment Reverse Flash disappeared, the world seemed to tremble and settle back into its dark, oppressive state. Batman and Flash stood amid the cracked and distorted alleyway, their senses still reeling from the confrontation. The silence was almost deafening after Thawne's malicious laughter faded into the distance. Flash took a deep breath, his mind racing with guilt. He had allowed himself to be drawn into Thawne's game just as Batman had, and now the situation was even worse. He glanced at Bruce, who was already gathering his thoughts, his expression a mask of cold calculation. I should have known it wasn't you, Batman said quietly, his voice hard but not accusatory. He was too focused on the larger threat to linger on their earlier fight. Thawne, it's trying to break us. We can. Let it. Flash shook his head. It's my fault too. Bruce, I should be seen the sign. Thawne's always looking for ways to mess with my head, with our head. Batman's eyes flickered toward the city skyline. He's been using the Speed Force to warp reality. If we don't stop him, the timeline itself could be irreparably damaged. Flash nodded. I've seen what he can do. He's already started bending the laws of physics. If we don't act fast, Gotham could become ground zero for a temporal catastrophe. Without another word, Batman pulled out a small device from his utility belt, a miniature scanner designed to detect anomalies in the fabric of space-time. The screen flickered, showing the erratic, distorted energy readings left behind by Reverse Flash. The trails of yellow lightning were like scars across the city. There, Batman said, pointing to the display. He said that for the heart of the city. We need to cut him off before he destabilizes the timeline any further. Flash gritted his teeth, the familiar hum of the Speed Force vibrating through his body. I'll get there faster, but I cannot do this alone. Bruce, we need to work together. Batman's expression softened slightly, just enough for Flash to know that they were on the same page. Now agreed, I'll follow Dante. Let him bait you again. Barry, with a determined nod, Flash bolted forward, disappearing in a streak of red lightning. Batman grappled onto a nearby building and followed in his own way, slower but methodical, using the rooftops to maintain a bird's eye view of the city below. As Flash tore through the streets, his mind raced even faster than his body. The city blurred around him, but his focus remained sharp. He had to find Thawne before the damage became irreversible. The Speed Force was humming louder, now warning him of the growing instability. The air around him seemed to shimmer as pockets of warped reality flickered in and out of existence, distorted images of a Gotham that could have been or might never be. Suddenly, Flash spotted a streak of yellow lightning cutting through the chaos ahead. Reverse Flash was moving even faster than before, his speed leaving behind a trail of cracked reality, as if he were splitting the world with every step. I am not letting you get away, Thawne, Flash muttered to himself, pushing his speed to its limit. He caught up with the yellow blur in seconds and, without hesitation, tackled Thawne mid-run, sending them both crashing into the side of a skyscraper. The force of their impact shattered the windows and sent debris raining down onto the street below. Flash pinned Thawne against the building, his face inches from his nemesis. This ends now, Flash growled. But Thawne only laughed, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. You think you can stop me, Barry? I am already inside your head. This fight was over before it even began. With a burst of speed, Thawne twisted out of Flash, grip, his movements impossibly fast. He spun around and delivered a vicious punch to Flash's side, sending Barry flying backward, crashing into the pavement below. The ground cracked beneath the force of the impact, and Flash felt a surge of pain shoot through his body. Thawne landed gracefully on the street, looking down at Flash with contempt. You were not fast enough, Barry. You never will be. Before Flash could recover, Thawne was on him again, kicking him across the street like a rag doll. Flash skidded to a stop near the edge of a construction site, his body battered and his mind clouded with frustration. Just as Thawne prepared to finish the job, a batarang whizzed through the air, striking him in the side. The surprise attack momentarily stunned him, and Batman appeared from the shadows, his cape billowing behind him as he landed between Flash and Thawne. You're not doing this alone, Batman said, his voice low and steady. Thawne sneered, but his eyes were wary now, so the Bat decides to play the hero too. How predictable. Batman didn't waste time with words. He charged at Thawne, throwing a series of precise punches aimed at his pressure point. Thawne dodged most of them with ease, but Batman's relentless assault forced him to stay on the defensive. Meanwhile, Flash struggled to his feet, his body aching but his resolve stronger than ever. I am not letting him win, Flash muttered, gathering his strength. In a blur of red, Flash rejoined the fight, moving in sync with Batman as they pressed on from both sides. Batman dealt his calculated strikes, and Flash Sense's blinding speed created a dangerous combination, pushing Thawne to his limits, but Reverse Flash wasn't done yet. With a roar of frustration, Thawne unleashed a wave of raw Speed Force energy, sending Batman and Flash flying in opposite directions. The air crackled with unstable electricity, and the ground beneath them trembled as the fabric of time itself began to unravel. You were both fools if you think you can stop me, Thawne shouted, his voice echoing through the shattered street. This timeline is mine to control. Flash wiped the blood from his lip and narrowed his eyes. Not if I have anything to say about it. Before Thawne could react, Flash tapped into the deepest reserves of his speed. The world slowed down around him as he entered the Speed Force fully, feeling its power surge through his veins. Time itself became a fluid thing, bending to his will. He could see Thawne's movements, clearly now could feel the vibrations of his energy. With precision only a master of the Speed Force could achieve, Flash darted forward, phasing through the debris and rubble. He reached Thawne in an instant, landing a lightning-fast punch squarely in his chest. Thawne staggered back, his face contorting in shock and pain. Thawne tried to fight back, but Flash was too fast, too determined. Finally, with one last thunderous punch, Flash sent Thawne crashing into the ground. The impact left a crater in the street, and Thawne lay motionless at its center, his body sparking with unstable energy. Panting, Flash looked down at his fallen enemy, his hands still trembling with adrenaline. Batman approached slowly, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of lingering danger. "Is it over?" Flash asked, his voice hoarse. Batman crouched down next to Thawne as unconscious form, checking his vitals for nap. Flash let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding the weight of the night cell events settled on his shoulders, but there was a sense of relief to a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. "We stopped him," Flash said more to himself than to Batman. Batman stood up, his cape swirling around him. "We stopped him this time, but Thawne will be back. He always is." Flash nodded, the reality of their situation sinking in. Thawne was a constant threat, always lurking in the shadows, always looking for a way to tear them apart. But tonight, at least, they had won. As the first rays of dawn began to break through Gotham's skyline, Batman and Flash stood side by side, their partnership forged in the fires of conflict. There would be more battles to come, more enemies to face, but for now they had each other, trust, and that Flash thought was something worth fighting for. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The faint hum of technology filled the Batcave, reverberating off the walls, like the sound of a distant storm. Screens flickered as data streamed across them. Batman stood at the console, analyzing a cryptic signal from the deep reaches of space. His jaw clenched under the cowl. The readings were unlike anything he'd seen before. A crisis, one that could threaten not just Gotham, not just Earth, but the universe. "Flash," Batman said into his communicator, "I need you in Gotham now." Before the words had even fully escaped his lips, a red blur streaked into the cave. Barry Allen, the Flash, halted beside him, his suit still crackling with static energy. "What's going on, Bats?" Flash asked, peering over Batman's shoulder at the data. His voice was light, trying to break the tension, but he knew it was serious if Batman was calling him in at this hour. "A cosmic crisis." So Batman replied, his tone low and clipped. "I intercepted a signal as alien. The frequency is a match for several planetary destruction events recorded across the galaxy, and it's not coming here. We have 72 hours. Flash's easy smile faded, replaced by the grim realization that whatever they were facing was far beyond the usual threat. 72 hours to figure this out and save the planet. No pressure. Batman-sized fingers flew across the console, bringing up a schematic of the signal. "I believe it's from a species called the Karen Tar. They're ancient and technologically superior, and they've already wiped out several star systems." The weight of Batman's words hung in the air. Flash stared at the screen, watching the pulsating red beacon marking Earth's inevitable fate. "Just so what's the plan?" Batman straightened his cape, fluttering behind him. "We stop them. But first, we need to find out where they're launching their weapon from. The Krantar's technology is beyond anything we've encountered, but I then traced their weapon signature to a system on the edge of the galaxy. We have to go there, disable the weapon, and ensure it can't target Earth. That's it, just a simple trip across the galaxy to stop a doomsday device. No problem." Flash quipped, but there was no humor in his voice. He glanced at Batman, who was already preparing the Batwing for launch. The stakes had never been higher, and both of them knew it. As the Batwing lifted off, breaking through the atmosphere into the inky blackness of space, Flash found himself marveling at how far Batman's technology had come. They were flying at light speed toward the edge of known space, a journey that would take mere hours thanks to the modifications Wayne Enterprises had made to the spacecraft. The cockpit was silent save for the steady hum of the engines, but beneath that silence there was a palpable tension. Flash fidgeted in his seat. "You ever think about how strange this is, me space saving the universe instead of just the planet?" Batman didn't look away from the controls. "But here we've done stranger things." "Fair point," Flash muttered, but his mind was racing. He fought aliens, been to alternate dimensions, but this felt different. There was a sense of finality to it, like they were on the verge of something monumental, and the outcome was far from certain. Hours later, they approached their destination, a system of dead planets orbiting a dying star. The Kawantar base was hidden within the debris field of a planet that had once teemed with life. Now only ruins remained. Batman scanned the area, locating the source of the energy signature that matched the weapon. That's the launch site. Flash squinted at the screen. "I am not seeing much of a welcoming committee." Don't underestimate them, Batman said darkly. If their technology is as advanced as I think, they'll have defenses we can't. The batarang swooped low over the surface of the planet, avoiding the scattered remnants of alien cities. Batman activated the ship's cloaking system just as they descended into the atmosphere, landing silently on a plateau overlooking the Karantar base. The structure below was vast, an intricate web of spires and domes that pulsed with a sickly, greenish light. "We're going in on foot," Batman said, grabbing a pack of tools and gadgets from the batarang's high storage compartment. "We'll need to disable their defenses before we can get anywhere near the weapon." Flash nodded, vibrating slightly with nervous energy. "Hi, so what's the plan? We sneak in, disable the weapon, and hightail it out of here before anyone notices?" "Exactly," Batman replied, already moving toward the base. "Alice, stay close and follow my lead." The terrain was rocky and uneven, but Batman moved with practiced precision, his dark silhouette blending seamlessly into the shadow. Flash, by contrast, was a blur of red as he darted from one cover to the next. Together they reached the base and perimeter where a force field shimmered faintly in the air. "This is where it gets tricky," Batman said, examining the energy field. "Their defenses are based on quantum encryption. We can just short-circuit it. We need to overload the system, but that requires perfect timing. Flash, I need you to generate enough speed to destabilize the field while I hack into their control systems. One mistake and we'll alert the entire base." Flash swallowed hard. "No pressure, right?" "None," Batman said, his voice as calm as ever. Sawdust moved. Flash crouched, feeling the familiar surge of energy coursing through his body as he prepared to run. Batman began working on the control panel, his gloved hands deftly navigating the alien interface. As Flash took off, his legs moving faster than the human eye could follow, the world around him blurred into streaks of light and shadow. He could feel the charge in the air as he built up speed, his body vibrating at a frequency that allowed him to phase through the quantum barrier. The field shimmered, flickering for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Batman's fingers danced over the controls, and with a soft click, the energy field dissipated. "Done," Batman said, standing up as the last remnants of the force field faded away. "Kira, let's go." Inside the base, the corridors were eerily silent. The walls were made of a strange metallic substance that absorbed sound, and the only light came from the greenish glow of the Karantar. Batman led the way, his cowl sound sensors scanning for signs of life. They moved deeper into the structure, passing through vast chambers filled with alien machinery. Flash's eyes darted around, trying to take in everything at once. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered under his breath. "Focabaz," Batman said quietly. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. Flash froze, his instincts kicking in. Bats, I think we've got company." Ahead of them, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, nearly 7 feet, with glowing eyes and armor that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid metal. This was no ordinary Karantar soldier. This was Zakharak, the leader of the alien race and the mastermind behind the weapon, threatening Earth. "I was wondering when you would arrive," Sarkatsal said, his voice a deep, mechanical rumble. "Your primitive species never fails to amuse me." Batman's jaws tightened. "We're here to stop you." Zorak chuckled, a cold, hollow sound. "You cannot stop what is already in motion. The weapon is primed, and soon your world will be nothing but ash." Flash stepped forward, fists clenched. "Tell Ned if we have anything to say about it." With a flick of his wrist, Sarkar activated a panel on his arm. The room around them began to shift, the walls melting away to reveal a massive chamber filled with the Karantar weapon, a pulsating, glowing sphere of energy suspended in midair, surrounded by hundreds of floating orbs, each one the size of a small planet. "The Karantar weapon," Batman murmured. "A galaxy-destroying device. Zarakok finished for him. Io, and you're too late." Batman's mind raced as he calculated the situation. The device was enormous, its energy surging in patterns too complex for even his advanced scanners to decipher immediately. Hundreds of floating orbs surrounded the central core, each one emitting its own gravitational field. It was a fortress and a weapon all in one, a level of sophistication that defied even Batman's considerable knowledge. Flash eyed the weapon, his muscles tensing as he prepared for action. "So we just smash it, right?" No, Batman said sharply, scanning the device. One wrong move, and you could set off a chain reaction. We need to disable it, but we have to be precise. You believe you can outthink the Kuruntar. Foolish, your species is already doomed. This weapon will bring an end to Earth and all who reside there. Batman stepped forward, his gaze locked on Sarek. We've faced worse than you. Perhaps, Sarek replied, his voice a low rumble, but never something of this magnitude. The alien warlord raised his hand, and the orbs around the weapon began to pulse with light. The room trembled as energy coursed through the structure, filling the air with an electric charge that made the hairs on Flash's arms stand on end. Flash shot a glance at Batman. You've got a plan, right? I am working on it, Batman muttered, his eyes never leaving the device. His cowl sensors were scanning the weapon, analyzing its structure, its energy output, and the patterns of the floating orb. We need to disable those orbs first. They're restabilizing the core without them. The weapon can't keep fire. Flash smirks. That I can do. In a heartbeat, Flash was gone, his body moving faster than light as he sped toward the nearest orb. The world blurred around him as he reached out, his fingers grazing the surface of the orb. But as soon as he touched it, a shockwave of energy blasted him backward, sending him skidding across the floor. Batman rushed to his side. Are you all right? Flash groaned, pushing himself up. Yeah, just got a little zap that sign off. Batman's brow furrowed. The orbs are protected by a defensive field. You'll have to disrupt it before you can disable the... Flash gave a quick nod, determination flashing in his eyes. So, ground to... This time, Flash adjusted his speed, vibrating his molecules just enough to phase through the orb's defensive field. He moved with precision, his hands a blur as he tore into the internal circuitry. Sparks flew and the orb's light flickered before going dark. One down, Flash called, already moving to the neck. Sarek's eyes narrowed as he watched the second orb fall, and then the third. His amusement faded, replaced by cold fury. You are meddling with forces beyond your comprehension. Batman ignored the taunt, his focus on the weapon's core with each orb that Flash disabled. The weapon's energy signature fluctuated, but it wasn't high enough. They needed to disrupt all of the orbs, and they were running out of time. Flash was a blur of red and lightning as he dismantled the orbs, one after the other. But just as he reached the final one, Savork raised his hand, and a barrier of energy erupted around the orb, sealing it off from Flash. I will not allow you to destroy my creation, Stockrank snarled. Batman's mind raced. He needed to find a way to disable the final orb, or everything would be lost. His eyes flicked to the control panel embedded in Zuckerberg's armor. That was it. The barrier was linked to Zuckerberg's suit. If they could disable the control mechanism, the barrier would fall. Flash, Batman said, his voice low and urgent. I need you to distract him. Flash grinned. Now that's something I can do. Without hesitation, Flash darted toward Zaldok, moving in unpredictable patterns to keep the alien warlord off balance. Sorek swung his massive arms, but Flash was too fast, dodging each attack with ease. The alien thus frustration mounted as he tried to land a hit, but Flash was everywhere and nowhere at once. Batman moved swiftly, using the distraction to close the distance between himself and Zakrak. In a fluid motion, he launched a series of small, precise gadgets toward the control panel on Zakrak's armor. The devices clamped onto the panel, hacking into the system and overriding the barrier control. The Sorek roared in anger as the barrier around the final orb flickered and died. You cannot win. Flash didn't waste a second. In a blur of motion, he phased through the defensive field and tore into the last orb-s circuitry. With a final surge of energy, the orb-s light faded and the entire chamber trembled as the weapon began to power down. We did it, Flash called, panting as he came to a stop beside Batman. But Thutsurak was not defeated. With a furious snarl, he raised his arm, preparing to detonate the weapon manually. The chamber shook as the energy levels spiked, threatening to tear the entire base apart. Batman lunged forward, his grappling hook shooting out and latching onto Zakrak's arm. With a powerful yank, he pulled the alien warlord off balance, but Zakrak was strong, too strong. He shrugged off the attack and raised his arm again, his eyes glowing with rage. Flash moved in a flash of red, circling Zakrak at speed. The alien warlord struggled to maintain his footing as the air around him swirled violently. Batman seized the moment, hurling an explosive batarang at Psychotrex's control panel. The device detonated with a sharp crack, sending sparks flying and short-circuiting Psychotrex's system. The warlord stumbled, his grip on the weapon, sun control weakening. Flash delivered the final blow, vibrating his hand at supersonic speeds as he struck Psychotrex's armor, shattering the control panel completely. Vrasora collapsed to the ground, his eyes dimming as the energy drained from his body. The weapon's core flickered and then, with a low hum, powered down completely. For a moment there was silence, then Flash let out a long breath, leaning against the wall. Man, that was intense. Batman didn't reply immediately. He was already scanning the weapon, Flash remains ensuring that it was completely disabled. After a tense moment, he nodded it. Flash straightened up, a grin spreading across his face. We actually did it. We stopped the weapon, saved the Earth, and kicked some serious alien butt. Batman gave a rare smirk. It's not over yet. We still have to get back to Earth. Flash laughed, wiping sweat from his forehead. Right, small detail. But hey, what as a little intergalactic road trip between friends? As they made their way back to the Batwing, Flash glanced at Batman. You know, we make a pretty good team. Batman didn't respond right away, but there was a slight nod as he activated the ship's engines. We do. The Batwing lifted off, carrying them away from the crumbling alien base. As they soared through the stars, Batman and Flash sat in silence, both of them reflecting on the mission they just completed. They had faced death, battled an enemy beyond anything they had encountered before, and come out victorious. But more than that, they had proven that their partnership, no matter how different their methods, was stronger than any challenge the universe could throw at them. As the stars blurred past the cockpit, Flash turned to Batman with a mischievous grin. So next time we get a cosmic mission, can we at least try to get some backup? Maybe bring Superman along. Batman's lips twitched in what could have been the beginning of a smile. Flash chuckled and leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of the universe finally lifting from his shoulders. They had saved Earth, and for now, that was enough. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. And rain fell in heavy sheets, drenching the city of Gotham in a dark, cold mist. Barry Allen, known to the world as the Flash, stood under the dim light of a street lamp, staring across the cityscape. Gotham always felt different from Central City, darker, grittier, with an ever-present weight pressing down on it. He'd been here countless times on missions with the Justice League, but tonight his purpose was different. His heart ached as he thought about Bruce Wayne, Batman, the man behind the masks, the one who bore the burdens of the world on his shoulders, with seemingly no one to share the weight. Barry had always admired Bruce's stoic nature, the way he pushed forward, unflinching no matter the cost. But over the years, Barry had also seen the cracks in Bruce's armor, the isolation, the pain buried deep within. Tonight, the idea had come to him suddenly, but once it took hold, it wouldn't let go. Time travel had been both a blessing and a curse for Barry. He'd used it to save his mother once, reversing the tragedy that had defined his life. But that act had almost destroyed everything, reshaping the timeline in ways he hadn't had predicted. He had sworn never to alter the past again, knowing the dangers it posed. But this was different. He told himself this wasn't about him. This was about Bruce, about saving the man who had saved so many. The thought of Bruce as a boy witnessing his parents' murder in that grim alley haunted Barry. It was the kind of pain no one should endure, and if he could stop it, if he could change that one moment, perhaps Bruce could finally find peace. Barry, a deep voice called out from the shadow. Barry turned, and there he was, Bruce in his civilian clothes, but no less imposing than when he wore the cape and cowl. His eyes, as always, were piercing, taking in everything around him. Barry had called him, knowing he couldn't do this without Bruce knowing. He needed Bruce's blessing, though he wasn't sure if he would get it. You were thinking about going back, Bruce said, his tone flat but with an edge of understanding. I can see it in your eye. Barry swallowed hard. I am just thinking, Bruce, what if did not have to be this way? What if you didn't have to lose them? Maybe you don't have to be Batman. Brucey's jaw tightened. I've told you before, Barry, the past is set. Changing it one T make things better. It'll only make them worse. But what if it doesn't? Barry stepped forward, his voice rising with a mix of desperation and hope. What if saving you from that night could change everything for the better? You don't have to carry this burden anymore. Bruce's gaze softened, but only for a moment. It's not about what I want. It's not about what's necessary. You don't let that believe that Barry shot back. You've told me about your nightmares, about the guilt you feel every day. If there's a chance to change that, don't you want to take it? Bruce looked away, his eyes scanning the city as if searching for something that would never come. It's not that simple. Gotham needed Batman. It still does. Without that night, I wouldn't have become who I am. But at what cost? Barry's voice was low now, pleading you. They've given everything for this city. Bruce, maybe it's time to give something back to yourself. Bruce was silent for a long moment. The rain continued to fall, the city below them a blur of lights and shadows. Finally, he spoke, his voice a whisper. And what about the cost to everyone else? You've seen what happens when the past is altered. The world changes in ways we can't predict. Barry nodded slowly, understanding but unwilling to back down. I know the risks, but this is different. I've learned from my mistake. I want to make the same ones again. I am asking you to trust me. Bruce's eyes locked onto Barry's ass, and for a second, Barry thought he might have convinced him. This is a path you can take. Trust me, Barry. Some things they need to happen. Barry clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. You re-asking me to do nothing, to stand by and watch you suffer for the rest of your life knowing I could change it. You're not changing it for me, Bruce said coldly. You're redoing it for yourself because you can. Stand the idea of pain that can be fixed, but this isn't about you. It's my past, my choice. Barry flinched, but he couldn't deny the truth in Bruce's words. Maybe there was some selfishness in his desire to help to right a wrong that had haunted both of them for so long. But even knowing that Barry couldn't let go of the possibility that things could be better. I am sorry, Bruce, he said quietly. I can't just walk away from this. Before Bruce could respond, Barry disappeared in a flash of lightning, leaving the dark night standing alone in the rain. The streets of Gotham in the past were quieter, the buildings older, but the atmosphere the same as city on the brink of darkness. Barry stood in the shadows of Crime Alley, watching from a distance as the young Wayne family exited the Monarch Theater. Thomas Wayne was tall and strong, with the air of a man who had never been afraid of anything. Martha was radiant, holding little Bruce's hand tightly, her love for her son evident in every gesture. Barry's heart pounded as he watched them walk down the alley. He knew what was supposed to happen next. Joe Chill would step out of the shadows, a desperate man with a gun, and in a few short moments the Waynes would be dead, leaving Bruce alone in the world. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times since deciding to make this trip. He had told himself he would be quick, precise, that he would save the Waynes without altering anything else. But now standing here, his hands trembled with the weight of what he was about to do. Just a few seconds, Barry whispered to himself, "That's all I need." He watched as Joe Chill appeared at the end of the alley, his gun drawn, his eyes wild. Thomas stepped forward, his hand raised, trying to calm the situation. But Barry knew it wouldn't work. It never worked. Time slowed as Barry prepared to act. He could feel the electricity coursing through his veins, ready to propel him forward, to stop this tragedy from unfolding. But something held him back, a voice in his head. Bruce's voice telling him that some things couldn't be changed. But Barry ignored it. He had to, for Bruce, for all the pain his friend had suffered. In an instant, Barry moved. He was a blur faster than the human eye could perceive. He knocked the gun from Joe Chill's hand, sending the would-be murderer stumbling backward into the shadow. Thomas and Martha stood frozen in shock, unaware of what had just happened, while little Bruce clung to his mother, Al's leg, confused but unharmed. But as the Waynes walked away, hand in hand, Barry couldn't shake the feeling of dread that began to creep into his mind. He had altered the timeline, and no matter how much he wanted to believe he could control the outcome, he knew deep down that the consequences were coming. When Barry returned to the present, he expected to feel relief, but instead, he was greeted by chaos. Gotham was unrecognizable, a city on fire, its streets overrun by crime and violence. The skyline was dominated by the towering strongholds of villains who had taken control in the absence of Batman. Barry's heart sank as he realized what had happened without the tragedy that had created Batman Gotham had fallen into ruin. Bruce had never donned the cape and cowl, and without his presence, the city had succumbed to the darkness he had fought so hard to keep at bay. And then Barry saw Bruce Wayne standing on the steps of Wayne Tower, but this was not the Bruce he knew. This Bruce was a shadow of the man he had been. He was older, softer, dressed in fine clothes, but with none of the fire or determination that had always defined him. Barry approached slowly, unsure of what to say. When Bruce turned and met his eyes, there was no recognition, only a blank, distant stare. "You did this," Bruce said, his voice hollow. Barry's breath caught in his throat. "Bruce, I was trying to help." "Help?" Bruce let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't help anyone. Barry, you destroyed everything." Barry felt the weight of Bruce's words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had thought saving Thomas and Martha Wayne would give Bruce a new life, a life free from the burden of becoming Batman. Instead, the man standing before him looked broken in a way Barry had never seen before. The vibrant, forceful energy that always radiated from Bruce even in his darkest moments was gone. "You destroyed everything." He swallowed hard, his mouth dry, searching for the right thing to say, but no words came. The city around them was a wasteland. The streets of Gotham, usually dark but orderly under Bruce's vigilant watch, were now crawling with crime and chaos. The skyline was littered with signs of destruction, buildings partially collapsed, fires burning in the distance, the unmistakable evidence of a Gotham without its protector. It was worse than Barry had imagined. "Bruce, I thought I could save you." "Sir," Barry said, his voice breaking. "I thought if I could stop that one moment, you wouldn't have to go through all that pain." Bruce turned away from him, staring out over the ravaged city. He stood in silence for a long moment, before speaking again, his voice distant. "You thought saving them would save me, but all you did was take away the thing that made me who I am." Gotham needed Batman. It still does. He looked back at Barry, his eyes hard, full of regret, towering. "And now there's no one left to save it." Barry's stomach twisted. He had known there were risks, but in his heart he had believed things would turn out better. That maybe just this once, altering the past wouldn't lead to disaster. But now, staring into Bruce's hollow eyes, Barry realized the truth. Some tragedies were meant to happen, and his attempt to rewrite fate had only led to a greater tragedy. "I can fix this," Barry said, his voice trembling. "I can go back again. I can put things right." Bruce shook his head. "You don't get it, Barry. It's not about fixing things. You keep trying to undo the pain, but some pain is necessary. Some things have to happen or everything falls apart. You can keep running from it." Barry clenched his fists. "But I am not running, Bruce. I am trying to help. Then help me by not trying to play God." Bruce's voice was cold, but there was an undercurrent of sadness beneath it. "We're not supposed to change the past, no matter how much we want to." Barry's sigh's heart pounded in his chest, a whirlwind of emotions crashing inside him: guilt, sorrow, anger. He had thought he was doing the right thing. He had convinced himself that saving Bruce's parents would bring peace. But now the weight of his mistake was crushing him, and he didn't know how to fix it. "I am sorry," Barry whispered, more to himself than to Bruce. "There, I thought." "I know what you thought." Bruce interrupted. "You thought you were giving me a gift, but some gifts aren't worth the cost. You've seen what happens when you change the past, Barry. You've lived through it." Barry's mind flashed back to the timeline he had altered, when he saved his own mother, the chaos and devastation that had rippled across the world as a result. He had learned that lesson the hard way, but he had hoped this time would be different. He had hoped saving Bruce's parents would be an exception. Bruce stepped closer to Barry, his expression softening slightly. "I know you meant well, Barry, but you need to let go something. Some tragedies, they define who we are. My parents' deaths shaped me into Batman. Without them, Gotham fell apart. Without Batman, this city was lost." Barry hung his head, the full weight of his actions sinking in. He had been so focused on helping his friend that he hadn't considered the broader consequences. He had taken away the very thing that had made Bruce who he was, and in doing so, he had doomed Gotham. "I'll go back," Barry said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll go back and undo what I did." Bruce nodded, though there was no satisfaction in his eyes. "Still, frail, instead, the only way." Barry didn't say anything more. He couldn't. He had failed his friend, failed Gotham, failed himself. The only thing left to do was to try and fix it, to restore the timeline to what it should have been. Without another word, Barry turned and vanished in a blur of lightning, leaving Bruce alone once again. The familiar sight of Crime Alley greeted Barry as he stepped out of the time stream back to the night that had started it all. The young Bruce Wayne and his parents were just leaving the theater, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Barry stood in the shadows, his heart heavy with dread. He had already saved them once, but now he had to stand by and watch it happen. Watch the event that would tear Bruce's life apart. The event that had to happen, no matter how much it hurt. Joe Chill stepped out of the shadows, just as he had before. Barry could see it all happening in slow motion. Every detail burned into his mind from the first time he had intervened. Thomas stepped forward, trying to reason with the man. Martha clutched Bruce tightly, her eyes wide with fear. Barry could stop it. He could save them again. But this time, he didn't move. He forced himself to stay still, even as every fiber of his being screamed at him to act. The gunshot rang out, shattering the night. Thomas Wayne fell to the ground, his life snuffed out in an instant. Martha screamed, but it was cut short as the second shot echoed through the alley. Bruce's small, terrified form was the only thing left standing in the alley as his parents lay dead beside him. Barry clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he didn't move. He couldn't teach he had made his choice. This was how it had to be. When Barry returned to the present, the city was quiet. Gotham's skyline, while still dark and imposing, was familiar again. It was the Gotham he'd known, and the one where Batman prowled the streets, keeping the shadows at bay. He found Bruce waiting for him on the rooftop of Wayne Tower. This time, he was dressed in his Batman suit, the cowl pulled back as he watched over the city. "You did it," Bruce said, not looking at Barry. "GT. The timeline is back to what it should be." Barry nodded, though he didn't feel the relief he had hoped for. The memory of the Waynes' death was fresh in his mind, and the knowledge that he had allowed it to happen, even knowing it was necessary, gnawed at him. "I'm sorry," Barry said softly. I thought I could fix it." Bruce turned to face him, his expression unreadable fear. "I know, but some things aren't meant to be fixed." Barry wanted to say more, to apologize again, to explain his reasons, but he stopped himself. Bruce already knew, he understood better than anyone, the weight of responsibility, the burden of choices that couldn't be undone. For a long time, the two heroes stood in silence, watching the city below. Gotham was safe again, at least for now, but the cost had been steep, and Barry knew that some wounds, even those healed by time, would never fully fade. Finally, Bruce spoke. "You can save everyone, Barry, no matter how fast you run." "I know," Barry replied, "but I wanted to save you." "You did," Bruce said, quietly, "just not in the way you thought." Barry glanced at Bruce, but his friend's eyes were fixed on the horizon, the weight of their shared experiences hanging in the air between them. The story had come full circle. The past was intact. Gotham was as it was meant to be. And yet the ache in Barry's chest remained. With a heavy heart, Barry knew that this was the price of being a hero, the eternal struggle between wanting to save everyone and knowing that some things, no matter how painful, had to remain unchanged. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to subscribe, and support me. Gotham City's skyline glowed against the stormy night. Flashes of lightning lit up the jagged architecture, casting long shadows that danced across the rain-soaked street. The citizens were used to bad weather, but this storm felt different, more dangerous. Somewhere in the heart of the chaos, a single figure moved through the darkness, like a phantom. Cloaked in shadows, Batman scanned the skyline, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Gotham's flickering power grid. Something was off. The Batcomputer's analysis had confirmed his suspicions. These weren't a natural storm. The electrical surges were too concentrated, too specific in their destruction. Every lightning strike had a purpose, crippling Gotham's infrastructure one piece at a time. Batman, the script tightened on his grapnel gun. Whoever was behind this knew Gotham better than most. Alfred, Batman spoke into his communicator, his voice low and calm despite the growing tension. Track the energy surges. They retargeting key points in the city power plants, substation. We were dealing with someone who knows how to cripple the grid. The reply came swiftly through the calm. "Already done, sir. I've detected a pattern, and I must say it, as quite alarming. The power surges are moving toward the Wayne Enterprises substation. If it goes down, most of Gotham's central districts will be without power for days." Batman's jaw clenched. I am heading there now. As he moved through the city, his mind raced with possibility. The raw power being wielded here was far beyond anything Gotham's usual criminals could manage. This was something different, something more calculated. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden burst of lightning striking a nearby building, sending sparks raining down onto the streets below. The storm was intensifying. In the distance, a red blur streaked across the city, moving faster than the eye could follow. Barry Allen the Flash was on his way. The Flash came to a stop beside Batman, his red suit glistening with rain, a wide grin on his face despite the chaos surrounding them. Batman, long time no see, you called for backup. Batman nodded curtly. This isn't a normal storm. Someone's manipulating the lightning targeting Gotham's power grid. Flash's expression grew more serious. Lightning manipulation, that's not something you see every day. You think it's unconnected to the Speed Force. Batman turned, his cape billowing in the wind as he began to explain. Possibly the energy signatures are unlike anything I've seen. They were fast, precise, almost like they were being channeled by something or someone. A loud crack echoed across the city, and both heroes looked up just in time to see a bolt of lightning strike a nearby power station. Flash's eyes widened. That sound our guy. Without hesitation, Flash took off, the world blurring around him as he raced toward the source of the disturbance. Batman followed, using his grapnel to swing between buildings, his mind already calculating the next move. Whoever was behind this had to be stopped, and quickly the entire city was at risk. As Flash neared the power station, he saw a figure standing atop one of the transformers, bathed in the glow of raw electrical energy. Sparks danced across the figure, his body crackling with power. His eyes glowed with a dangerous intensity, and lightning arced from his fingertip. Voltaris, Flash muttered under his breath. He recognized the villain immediately. Voltaris was a minor metahuman who had recently surfaced, but it looked like he'd found a way to enhance his powers drastically. Flash Voltaris called out, his voice distorted by the electrical currents surging through him. I've tapped into something far greater than the Speed Force with this power. I'll control Gotham and then the world. Flash stopped a safe distance away, readying himself for the fight. You think you can take on both me and Batman? You're about to learn the hard way. Voltaris sneered, electricity coursing through his veins. I don't need to be faster than you, Flash. I just need to be smarter. Before Flash could react, Voltaris sent a massive bolt of lightning directly at him. The Flash dodged, moving at super speed, but the attack was faster than he anticipated. The bolt grazed his arm, sending a jolt of pain through his body. You'll need more than that, Flash quipped, shaking off the numbness in his arm. He quickly turned to the comlink in his ear. Batman, we've got a serious problem. This guy amped up his power to insane level. From a nearby rooftop, Batman watched the battle unfold. His mind was already working through possible strategies, calculating Voltaris' weaknesses. The electrical energy was tied to the city's power grid, which meant there had to be a way to cut him off. I'll handle the power source, Batman replied calmly. Keep him busy. Flash smirked. That's all I'll do best. With a burst of speed, Flash sprinted toward Voltaris, moving faster than the eye could see. He landed a punch to Voltaris' side, the impact sending a shockwave through the air. But Voltaris barely flinched, retaliating with a surge of electricity that forced Flash to retreat. You can outrun lightning, Flash, Voltaris taunted, sending bolts of energy in every direction. Flash gritted his teeth. This was bad. Voltaris was more powerful than he'd expected. He couldn't do this alone. Batman, meanwhile, had made his way into the substation's control room. The power systems were overloaded, sparking dangerously as Voltaris drew more and more energy. Batman's fingers danced across the console as he attempted to reroute the power, cutting off Voltaris' supply. But Voltaris wasn't tackling down without a fight. Sensing Batman's interference, he unleashed a massive wave of electricity that surged through the station, sending Batman flying across the room. Batman, Flash's voice crackled over the comlink. I am fine, Batman replied, picking himself up from the ground. His suit had absorbed most of the impact, but he could feel the strain in his muscle. He wasn't as fast as Flash, but he didn't need to be. He just needed to outthink Voltaris. Flash continued his relentless assault, using his speed to dodge Voltaris' attacks and land quick hit. But Voltaris was adapting, his lightning strikes becoming more precise, more controlled. Each time Flash moved, that's enough Voltaire's roared, summoning a massive bolt of lightning that struck the ground in front of Flash, forcing him to come to a stop. The air crackled with energy as Voltaire advanced, his eyes glowing with power. You think you can stop me, Flash? I've become more than just a speedster. I am the storm. Flash mind raced. He couldn't outpace Voltaire's lightning, not while he was drawing power from the city. He needed a new approach, something Batman would come up with, and then it hit him. Batman had taught him one crucial lesson in all their time working together: slow down and think. Flash took a deep breath, centering himself. He focused on Voltaire's, not as a force of nature, but as a man with weaknesses. The speed force was powerful, but it wasn't too invincible. He darted forward again, this time not aiming for Voltaire's directly, but for the power lines feeding him energy. With precision only a speedster could manage, Flash disconnected the lines, severing the electrical flow. Voltaire stumbled, his connection to the city's power weakening. Batman finally regaining control of the substation systems, cut the main power grid, plunging the area into darkness. Voltaire's lightning dimmed, and for the first time, the villain looked vulnerable. You were finished, Flash said, his voice calm and steady. Voltaire, now drained of his power, sank to his knees, the last sparks of electricity flickering around him. Batman approached, his silhouette towering over the defeated villain. Gotham doesn't he fall to men like you? Batman growled, his voice low and menacing. Flash nodded, the tension finally easing from his body. That was close. Batman gave a brief nod in return, too close. As they cuffed Voltaire and prepared to transport him to Arkham, Flash couldn't help but reflect on the fight. This wasn't just about speed, it was about control, about precision, things Batman had been teaching him all along. Flash wiped the rain from his forehead as he watched the Gotham police take Voltaire into custody. The storm, which had raged so fiercely just moments before, was beginning to calm. Thunder still rumbled in the distance, but the worst of it had passed. Batman stood silently beside him, his cape draped heavily over his shoulders, the cowl hiding most of his aggression. It was a familiar scene, chaos, and then the silence afterward. Flash, on the other hand, wasn't used to Gotham's dark atmosphere. It always felt so oppressive, even on nights like this, when they saved the day. You think he's done for good? Flash, as the police van pulled away. Voltaire securely inside. Batman didn't immediately answer. He had learned long ago that no villain was ever truly finished in Gotham. They always found a way to return. Instead, he turned to Flash, his expression as unreadable as ever beneath the cowl. But we've cut off his power source. He won't be a threat for a while. Flash crossed his arms and nodded. Yeah, but he was using Speed Force energy or something close to it. That's new. We're gonna have to keep an eye on him. Batman's eyes narrowed beneath his cowl. And what about you? You lost control back there. You were faster than him, but he almost had you. What? Flash frowned, running a hand through his rain-soaked hair. I don't know. He was using lightning in ways they've never seen before. It threw me off. He was tapping into something beyond just the city's tower grid. Something that felt like it was affecting me directly, like it was drawing from the Speed Force in a way I couldn't. Batman's gaze shifted, processing the information. He wasn't metahuman. He couldn't tap into the Speed Force, but he had a lifetime of experience dealing with unpredictable, dangerous foes. That's why you need control, Batman said, his voice a steady growl. You move too fast, rely too much on your speed against someone who can match you. Precision and patience are your best tool. Flash shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Easy for you to say, you were used to fighting at a slower pace. For me, everything's happening at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Batman, slips pressed into a thin line, far then slow it down. Flash opened his mouth to retort, but he stopped himself. He had a point. Batman always had a point. Barry had always prided himself on being able to think fast on his feet, literally and figuratively. But in a fight like this, where every second counted, slowing down and assessing the situation wasn't easy. Flash said after a beat of silence, I never thought I'd be getting tactical advice from a guy without superpower. Batman expression, did he change? You don't need powers to win a fight. Flash smirked. Fair enough. There was a sudden crackle in their earpieces as Commissioner Gordon's soft voice came through the comm. Batman, Flash, I am getting reports of another surge of energy in the northern part of the city. Looks like this might not be over yet. Batman glanced at Flash. "We run it. On it, calling," he replied. Flash's smirk disappeared, replaced by the serious focus he reserved for moments like this. "He looks like we've got round two." Batman fired his grapnel, swinging into the night while Flash took off in a blur of red lightning racing ahead. As he sprinted through the streets of Gotham, dodging cars and pedestrians, Flash kind raced. He couldn't shake Batman's words, precision and patience slow it down. In theory, it sounded simple. In practice, it was an entirely different matter. He reached the Northern District in seconds, stopping just outside an old, decrepit industrial warehouse. The air crackled with residual electricity. Even without Batman's detective skills, Flash could tell something was wrong here. He could feel it in the air, the same energy signature as Volterra. Batman arrived moments later, landing silently beside him. "Sire, this is where the power surge came from." "Pry," he said, already scanning the area with his cowl's sensors. "Pry there. Something else here." Flash took a deep breath. "I can feel it too. It's like the speed force is reacting to it." Before either of them could move, a bolt of lightning struck the ground in front of them, forcing them both to leap back. The air shimmered and a figure stepped out of the darkness, electricity sparking at his fingertip. It was Volterra's, only this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a massive shadowy figure, cloaked in dark armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. The figure radiated power and energy that Flash had never encountered before. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form. "Batman, Flash," Volterra sneered, electricity crackling around him. "Did you really think you'd seen the last of me? My master had other plans." Batman's hand moved toward his utility belt, but the shadowy figure spoke before he could act. "Enough. You've been a thorn in Gotham's side long enough, Batman." Flash felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just another villain. This was something far more sinister. He glanced at Batman, who was already in a defensive stance, eyes locked on the shadowy figure. "Who are you?" Batman demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The figure stepped forward, his presence almost suffocating. "I am the darkness, the speed force you rely on. Flash is just one aspect of the universe. Synergy. I control another, the energy of shadows, the power to bend time and space as easily as you run." Tear Flash's mind raced, tear that side impossible. "The speed force is limited." The darkness interrupted. "You've only scratched the surface of what true power is, Flash, and now I am going to show you." Before Flash could react, the darkness raised his hand and the world around him slowed. Not just in the way it always did when he moved at super speed, but in a way that felt wrong. It was as if time itself was warping, bending around him. His legs felt like they were moving through molasses, his arms sluggish and unresponsive. Batman moved, throwing a batarang at the darkness, but it disintegrated in midair, swallowed by the shadow. Volterra laughed, his electrical power flaring to life. "Gareth, this is what real power looks like, Flash, and now you're going to feel it." Flash gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull of the darkness. He tried to tap into the speed force to push past the barrier, slowing him down, but it was no use. The energy of the darkness was too strong, too overwhelming. He could feel it seeping into his body, pulling him into its grip. Batman, the strategist, was already analyzing the situation. "You can defeat him with speed." He called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Gosh, you need to use your mind, Barry. Focus." Flash closed his eyes, blocking out the voices, the noise, the panic. He could feel the speed force inside him, but it was being stifled by the darkness. Batman's words echoed in his mind. "Slow it down." With a deep breath, Flash did the unthinkable. He stopped. He let the speed force recede, letting go of the desperate need to outrun the darkness. And then, in the stillness, he felt a connection, not just to the speed force, but to the energy surrounding him. The shadows, the darkness. It was all part of the same cosmic force. Barry's eyes snapped open, his mind clear. He wasn't going to beat the darkness by running faster. He was going to beat him by outthinking him. "I get it now," Flash muttered under his breath, a small smile playing on his lip. The darkness had power, but he had something stronger understanding. With newfound clarity, Flash moved, not at super speed, but with precision, dodging Volterras, lightning strikes, and weaving through the shadowy tendrils of the darkness. He wasn't trying to outrun them anymore. He was working with the flow, bending the energy around him. Batman, seeing the shift in Flash Arech, took advantage of the distraction. In one swift motion, he launched a series of small explosives at the darkness feet, detonating them in a burst of light. The shadows recoiled, giving Flash the opening he needed. With a final burst of speed, Flash darted toward the darkness, channeling the full force of the Speed Force into a single punch. The impact was like a sonic boom, rippling through the air and sending the darkness stumbling backward. Volterras screamed as his electrical energy flickered and died, collapsing to the ground. The darkness, weakened by the attack, melted into the shadows, retreating into the night. Flash stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Batman approached, his cape billowing in the wind. "Monsieur, you figured it out, dearie," he said, simply. Flash nodded, still catching his breath. "Yeah, it took me long enough." The two heroes stood in silence for a moment, watching as the last remnants of the storm faded into the night. Gotham was safe for now. As they made their way back toward the Batmobile, Flash glanced at Batman. "See you not so bad for a guy without powers." Batman smirked, a rare expression on his usually stoic face. "Tire and you